Hey, deserving listeners. Today's episode is about the new show on Netflix called Unbelievable. In this episode, we're going to talk about the first episode mainly because that's what I'm mainly concerned about. We might spoil the rest of the season, kind of, but Umberto is here with us, and he's only seen the first episode, and I also don't want to spoil it for people out there because it is an interesting story. And mainly psychologically and clinically, what I'm interested in is talking about the first episode, which isn't a spoiler at all to hear about that prior to seeing the episode, in my view. In this episode, we're going to be talking about rape and sexual assault. And if you are triggered by such things, then I would proceed extremely cautiously. We're not going to be talking about graphic details because that's not the sort of show this is, but it's probably going to dip a little bit into that. So just be really careful about that. Unbelievable is one of the hit TV shows that Netflix has put forth. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 97%. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. It sounds like a downer. It sounds like a hard watch, but it actually is extremely interesting, very compelling TV. And the episode has 8 episodes, each about 45 minutes long. And it's one of those bingeable things like Stranger Things where you get to the end of the episode and you just can't wait to watch the next episode. You got to find out what happens. It's going to be one of those shows that's going to get Emmys, I'm guessing, because it's a TV show next year around. It'll definitely be nominated. And so it's just going to be one of those shows, and I highly recommend watching it. And we're going to talk about it on this show because it puts forth ideas that I've never seen depicted in a movie or a TV show before. Something that is a big, big problem in our society and other societies too, and something that our special guest on the show knows all too well. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Umberto?
My name is Umberto Castaneda, and I design widgets mostly used on airplanes.
And Christy, introduce yourself to podcast land. People know you because you've been on the podcast before.
I so want to make up a occupation.
Makeup? What are you talking about? That's strange.
Makeup? What do you mean?
I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. Fabulous waffle maker. No, I'm a therapist and couple and family therapist. I went to school and studied under Kirk, and big fan of the podcast of both Kirk and Umberto. Been listening for a long time, so.
We've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been on the show a number of times. Most recently, you did the schema therapy episode, and a lot of people liked that because they heard your schemas and your inner teenager that you allow to come out. His name is Kevin. A lot of people responded to that.
Yeah.
You've been on many other episodes in the past, to my memory. So let's get into this. Unbelievable.
Cool.
Again, we're going to spoil at least the first episode, maybe a little bit the more episodes later. So if you're really concerned about spoilers, watch. It's infinitely bingeable.
Yeah.
Me and my wife Stacy, we binged episodes 3 through 8 last night.
Just tell me, is it aliens?
Yes.
Okay.
But even
I think
with
it
that,
was zombies.
even
In
with
purgatory?
even with the it was purgatory the whole time. What a wonderful plot. The show is about a real story that was local. Mm-hmm. That I'm wondering if I was even connected to, because I've supervised many therapists who worked in Linwood, because Linwood's not that far from here. I've always lived in North Seattle. We're pretty close to the Linwood border. At Antioch, I've supervised people, and so I actually looked it up. I'm not connected to this case.
Okay.
If I was, I wouldn't be talking about it.
You know, when the show was starting, because I think what happened is I saw the advertisement on Netflix, no idea what it was about, didn't know it was based on anything, and I clicked and I watched that first episode. And as the episode was playing, I kept hearing Snohomish, hospital, whatever, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. And then it's obvious. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That's here.
Yeah.
It was a trip.
Yeah, the whole time, just incidentally, I was watching it, and there's like Linwood Police Department, Linwood Mall or something. And I was skeptical because a lot of times they'll slap some other label, meanwhile they're shooting it in Northern California or something. And I got that kind of vibe at times, but anyway, so let's get into it. Starring Toni Collette and Merritt Weaver and the lovely Caitlin Dever, who played the main character, Marie Adler. She, if you don't remember, she was in Booksmart, which is one of the best movies of the year as well. So I'm just going to briefly summarize the case, and I'm going to try not to spoil things. And then what I want to do is I'm going to throw to Christy, because Christy went through what I understand to be an almost identical situation to the main character Marie went through, and also what so many other women and men have gone through.
Meaning you just imagine random things and make them up.
Right,
And accuse
exactly.
people basically.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So-
like they all do.
yeah.
So the first episode is mainly about Marie Adler, and she actually commented after seeing the show, and she's alive today. She's 29 years old. She thought the show was excellent.
Good.
And she's now married with 2 kids, and she's a long-haul trucker.
Oh,
Whoa.
She drives an 18-wheeler across the country.
Hardcore.
Yeah, so she's doing well, and she has an interesting job. So this is about a serial rapist who committed a number, probably at least a couple dozen rapes in around Seattle area and in the Denver area. And he was Mark O'Leary, Army veteran, started raping around the age of 30 years old. He knew the police procedures. He had this book that allowed him to understand how police procedures operated, and he would design his crimes around the weaknesses of forensics in the police department. So he was very concerned with DNA and with hair and with, witnesses and that sort of thing. And after he was caught, spoiler alert, he told police that he had fantasized about rape since he was a child. And he was trying to recreate, get this, the way Jabba the Hutt chained up Princess Leia.
wow.
And those computer files that are at the end of the series have still not been decrypted, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So anyway.
So
So the first episode, go ahead, Burrow.
I was going to say, it's very interesting to me because the fact is that if you are, in my mind, if I was imagining, hey, Berto, describe to me what you think is a stereotypical rape or something. I might naively or whatever, my impression might be, it's like late at night in some alley next to a bar, and then there's lots of alcohol involved, and something like that.
Well, certainly that's a profile.
Yeah. But I would generally not imagine, someone's going to break in to a house with a full suit on and do a whole bunch of almost surgical maneuvers. Like, that's not the first thing that would come to mind.
Yeah. But that's also certainly a profile.
Right.
Another common profile is date rape.
Right.
And
the most common profile is an acquaintance.
Yeah. Someone,
Actually.
a friend.
Which makes it a little bit hard sometimes, too, when there's acquaintance rape or someone if our culture has this concept like you,
Right.
that they're going to jump out of the bushes
Some
or
random
some
stranger.
alley or some random stranger.
Yeah.
It makes it harder to prosecute when it's
right.
but you knew the person. Because our cultural concept of what it looks like is this boogeyman that jumps out and gets you.
Especially
and
if
of
it
course,
was-
there are these guys like this too that are serial and go into people's homes and continue it.
Yeah. Especially if it was like the boyfriend or the ex-boyfriend. It's like,
Right.
Well, I mean,
Makes it more complicated.
Or your
guys-
husband.
Yeah.
Right.
Or your wife.
Or your uncle.
We got to be clear that men and are victims of rape, and also women are perpetrators to both men and women. So Marie Adler was the first victim, and the show starts off first episode that she's raped, and she goes to the police. The police show up. They do the investigation, and what we see is correct me if I'm wrong, an accurate depiction of what a typical police response to a rape that would be. And the interesting thing that really sets Unbelievable apart from the billions of other procedurals, NCIS and Law and Order, is that this is 100% from the victim's point of view, which is a brand new way of telling a story. We've all seen Law and Order, but it's always told from the police and the prosecutor.
The viewer only knows what the police and the
Right.
Yeah, knows generally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
sometimes there's some dip into empathy for the victim for sure.
Right.
But this one, you're in her shoes.
Yeah.
And that first episode, you're walked through step by step, and you just get this sense of how violating unintentionally the system
Oh,
is
it's terrible.
to a person who was victimized in this way.
That by the way, that was definitely hard to watch. And I was so upset watching it. I'm like, this can't be real. This can't be how you were treated when this happens.
Right. And just to give a brief summary, the police show up because they're investigating a crime, and then they start asking questions of the victim. There's no care towards the emotional state of the victim. There's no, how are you? There's no, would you like a glass of water?
Right.
How are you feeling right now? Take your time. It's just, give me the facts, ma'am.
Right.
The way you would if you showed up to ask someone about a car theft or something. There's just this complete ignorance of trauma and of what is the typical state of a victim after that. And then as inconsistencies start to crop up in her story, which is totally natural, there's a confrontation like, hey, you have some inconsistencies in your story. Well, what's the chance that you're going to remember every fucking detail about something she was woken up by the assault.
Right.
And it all happened so fast. Plus, she's 18 years old. But even if you're 70.
Well, and they're having her tell it over and over again and then write it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, by the way, you don't write the same way that you talk, ever, period. And like her state, they do a really good job in the show of this too. They're so good at unintentionally gaslighting her that you can tell her actually she's like, well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure this happened to me. Like,
Right.
what the hell? You know?
Now, a trauma-informed or a rape victim-informed police officer, like the woman that we see later, she's like, take your time. It's okay. Sometimes you forget things. It's okay. And she's not writing down and looking for inconsistencies because she knows, one, because she is smart, and two, because she's been through it herself. So, Christy, tell us what it was like to go through that process.
To go through that. Well, I think twofold is one, what it was like to watch it again.
Yeah, please, yeah.
On Unbelievable. That was I didn't know if I was going to get through the first episode, actually. I was like, I'm not sure I can do this. But I think for me, it's been about...
Did you know what the show was about before?
I did.
Were you like, okay, I got to prepare myself?
No, because I'm like, I mean, I talk about rape so much, like, I will have a conversation about it over pizza. Yeah. Like, it's kind of normal to me now.
Right. Because the fast forward in your story, you became an advocate who got up in front of crowds of people and talked about your story.
Yes.
So this isn't something that is new to you to discuss. Right.
Like, I think the hard part was that for just watching it is that the way they did a really good job of capturing what the memories are like, because it's all very like, you just see clips of it, and you're just like, and then that, and then this, and then that happened. Yeah. And you're like, and then sometimes they're kind of scrambled out of order, and you're like, wait. And I think one of the things that I love so much is they named this show Unbelievable. And one of the very first things that happens to a victim is this sense of like, did that just happen to me? That's literally unbelievable. Like, it's pretty hard to internalize it, that it actually happened. Yeah. So I think
So did you question yourself in terms of...
Yes. I was like, I remember I called the police and I said, I think I've been raped. Like, that was literally similar. Like, I think this happened, even though I knew it did. It just was so confusing to me that it could. And then it was from there to where I was, to the police, being in the police car, and then from the police to the hospital, and then from the hospital to the police station. And then from the police station, my mom actually came and picked me up.
So a trauma-informed or a rape victim-aware investigator would hear, I think, and say, 99% sure something happened, and we have a victim here
Right.
who was just trying to wrap their mind around it.
Right.
Dumbass cop, as portrayed in this show, who was a
Right.
real life police officer, who has no idea, even though they're a police officer, and it's their job to know this. That's the thing about this that pisses me off. It's like, okay, average plumber doesn't understand the state of a mind of someone who has been raped.
Nope.
Police officers, detectives, 45, 55-year-old guys, they should know.
Right.
It'd be like me as a therapist not understanding what to do when a client falls in love with me or something. It's like,
I don't know what.
if that just completely catches me out of nowhere, then one, I'm negligent for not educating myself, and two, my system in my field has been negligent to not alert me to this.
Well, I will say that I got the sense that, because the other thing the show did really well is, even though, of course, we're all horrified by how she's being treated, I felt that the cops were portrayed fairly realistically to what I would imagine, sadly, right? And they were not portrayed like demons, like,
Right.
oh, I'm sure
Right.
you're making it up, little girl, right?
Right. They weren't like overtly awful.
Right. It was like, in fact, at first they're kind of like, they're being so, or the whole system is failing her, but they're like, oh, okay. Well, and then now that one guy does cross over and he's like, okay, I think you're lying to us. And
Right.
blah, blah,
And
blah.
so the real life other police officer had almost no experience with rape.
Right.
And he was actually a narcotics guy or
taller
something.
guy?
Yeah, the taller guy,
Yeah.
who was actually the dumb guy actor who was on Coach with Craig T. Nelson.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
That was
my
him.
God. Yeah.
But anyway,
That's why
That's him?
yeah.
Looks very different.
That's why you look, but that's why you look familiar.
I know. I was thinking the
That's
same.
funny. Okay.
I gotta say though that the police, I think that they're some of it. I mean, I think it's empathy collapse is part of it. Like it's hard to take it all in. I think there's a lot of reasons why people doubt or try to keep their distance from the. I think that in order to continue doing their job as police officers, they kind of. They're suspect. I also think that, just to piggyback on schema therapy, I think that they get a schema that people make stuff up, or there's a mistrust schema of women that becomes internalized through sexism or patriarchy. But then there's also, I don't want this to happen to people. I don't want this to happen to my wife. I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want this to happen to my kids.
Right.
I really feel more comfortable with a coping mechanism that says, I overcompensate and reject that this happens, so I'm going to it's more comfortable to believe that it didn't.
Research showed in retrospect that this precinct had something like 4 or 5 times the greater rate of rape case victims being accused of lying.
Oh my God.
Than the
It's
average precinct. So there was something about this particular precinct.
I would though say it might feel like I would caution to feel a comfort that it's this particular precinct, because in my 13 years since my rape, I've talked with so many people and so many survivors, and unfortunately this is pretty normal.
Right.
I don't want to diss on the good police officers out there, because I did have one really good detective through my process that helped me so much, but there were so many people all along the way that really dropped the ball, really made mistakes, really made me feel unsupported. But so there are good ones out there, but I would say across the board we have a problem.
Yeah, so I want to and don't let me walk you through things you don't want to be walked through.
I'm totally ready.
Okay. So how old were you during the assault?
33.
This was about 10 years ago.
Yeah, no,
15.
13 years ago.
And you were in Seattle?
I was actually home visiting family.
In Kansas?
Mm-hmm, in Kansas.
And you, it was a stranger,
Yes.
correct me?
Yeah.
And it was like at night, or what were the circumstances?
It was at night. It was a drug-facilitated rape, so I woke up with somebody. I didn't know who he was, and he was just, it was very similar to what she went through. It's like you just wake up and they're there.
So
and it's happening.
It was drug facility, you said?
Yeah, so like somebody drugged me.
While
He
you were
did.
out
Yeah.
with friends
And
or
then
something?
I woke up in this place.
So he had like dragged you or like led you somewhere? Or?
No, there was a house party across the street, and so we ended up over there.
Okay.
Oh, you hadn't gone to that house party.
We had gone for a bit, and then I
Okay.
don't really remember. So this is where it gets, and then this is what's even harder is like, so like looking at the types of rapes, what's prosecutable, what's believable. When we have drug facilitated rapes now, we don't need to beat the shit out of someone. And really, it's hard to get a jury to buy
Right.
that this happened to you if there's not this like horrible,
Oh, because you're not bruised. Or
you're
something.
not bruised. Yeah, like I was, but like not to the extent that it would have been if it was an attack where they had to overpower me in that moment.
To me, the key is that research shows that of those allegations where people come forward and make an allegation, it's found that the vast, vast majority of those people are telling the truth.
Yeah.
One, because everyone knows that to make such an allegation is going to incur a lot of possible bad things. So for someone to actually come forward and say something, it probably happened.
Yeah.
The rate of false allegations like that is pretty slim. They happen.
I know the statistics on that.
What is it?
2%, between 1% to 2%. And the problem is they don't actually track why they're classified as false report. And some of them are classified as false report because the victim recants their story out of fear or out of this intimidation from the police.
Wow.
And they also never keep track of the people who wanted to prosecute but weren't allowed to.
Right.
There's a lot of people that really want to. And I was looking at the RAIN, that's the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website. They draw really good statistics from the Department of Justice. And right now, out of every 1,000 rapists, only 5 will ever spend a day in jail. So
Right.
995 of them walk.
Right.
So
And-
it's pretty hard to face those numbers sometimes. And
Right.
it's like,
And-
what's going on?
My soapbox is that I always get on about this is that, of course, certain a percentage of criminals are going to get away with it because they cover their tracks. They're just hard to track down. But that rate is way out of whack with other kinds of similar crimes like robberies or
Yes.
random assaults on the street or something. And the reason for that is because of us. We have built a society that actively punishes victims
Yep.
in a variety of ways that this show Unbelievable depicts. Everyone knows that. And so therefore, they don't even come forward. And even if they do, the system fails them often. And so
And they wish they hadn't.
Right. And that's what, Marie Adler eventually says later on. She's like, what I've learned is I should have never reported this. I
Yeah.
wish I would have lied more effectively from the beginning.
Yep.
The problem was that I had some trust in the world left. And what this event taught me is that I should have never trusted anyone because that's what the world has taught me. Everyone understands that from the age of 10 years old,
Yep.
maybe even as young as 5, children have gotten the message from our society that if you come forward about things like this, now if you come forward about being mugged or robbed,
Right.
you're how many people don't tell the cops when their car is stolen?
Right.
How many people don't call the cops when someone breaks into their house? Like less than 1%.
And you can tell people at work the next day.
Yeah, you'll be like, oh my God, someone broke into my house. How many people report to anyone, let alone the police, that they've been sexually assaulted or raped?
Right.
Very low percentage.
Very.
And that's because of us. It's not because of the victims and their weakness. It's not because of a couple police officers. It's because of the messages we give, the shame, the system, the lack of trauma-informed care, the lack of research, the lack of education, the lack of legislation,
Yep.
the lack of feminism, and we're failing, and right now, a show like Unbelievable, we're like, okay, there's this seduction around like, okay, well, we caught him. I get to go to bed, sleep well, knowing that we got, Mark O'Leary.
And that was 50 years ago, right?
It was recently.
Yeah.
Just like 7 years ago, they caught him, or 8 years ago.
Wow.
And right now, at your statistic, what was it, 95 or
995 out of 1,000.
995 out of 1,000 rapists
Never.
are right now at large. Do you think they've wrapped up their raping? They're continuing to do this. It reminds me of the Brock Turner case. A similar kind of case where the woman even admitted, she's like, I got really, really drunk to the point where I was sort of blacking out. And he was convicted, but he was only given like 3 months in jail or something like that.
That's also pretty typical. The incarceration time period is rather low if they ever get to jail.
Right.
If you ever get to prosecute. I think another thing, just to interject really quick, is one thing I learned in the process was that rape is a crime against the state, not against you. So even if the woman or man or victim wants to prosecute, the ultimate say in whether or not that happens is the state. So you can be denied, and they also don't keep track of how many people are denied access to the justice system. You could go through the civil process, but when you do that, you have zero protection. Like in criminal system, you have rape shield laws that will protect you from them asking you questions about like your partners or your lifestyle, things that aren't really relevant to what happened. So they'll basically just, if you go in a civil case, they're just going to destroy you on the stand. And then also civil cases cost a lot of money, which not a lot of people have access to. And if they find, just like with what happened with her, if they find that you are partially responsible, you might get charged with something.
Right, you could be sued for libel or whatever.
Yeah. And so it's just really not accessible for people to, and you're right. And I love, it makes me feel so good to sit there and watch you get so mad about people not doing well enough, because we aren't. And I think that, it's because we just don't talk about it. The shame silences us, and then people don't know how to talk about it. People don't want to believe it happens. People don't want to deal with the fallout of it. And we have all these rape myths and like you're asking for it kind of concepts. And then what ends up happening is your attorneys and judges know that your jury is filled with people who believe rape myths, believe that women ask for it or believe that women lie. And so they know it's very, very difficult to prosecute. Because we're going to turn this over to 12 people from our community. So the change really needs to happen on several levels. One, systemically within the justice system and how we respond to it. But also culturally, we need to help people understand, look, this does happen and people aren't making it up.
Right. Happens to a lot of people. Okay, so you're in Kansas, you wake up, he's on top of you. Then what happens?
I remember saying, what are you doing? Get off of me. Who are you? That kind of stuff.
Who are you? You didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was.
Oh.
So total stranger, and he was like, I couldn't move. And he was mad.
Because of the drug or?
Yeah,
both?
I think probably fear and the drug. I remember being like, I can't. At first, I couldn't even speak. So I was just like, what? I can't resist, right? So I just couldn't move. But I remember saying once I was able to speak, hey, who are you? What are you doing? Get off of me. And he was really mad that I was saying that. And it was kind of weird. It was he was in this delusion, he wanted to hug me and he thought we were in love or something. And I was just really, terrified and creeped out. And once he finally got off of me, I was I still couldn't move. And I think he was worried because I was so upset. And I honestly don't think he thought he was doing anything wrong.
Right.
Or it was something he did so much that maybe me waking up was a surprise to him.
Was he intoxicated?
I don't know. I think so, maybe,
Then he
just left. you know, it was like this story. It's like people that they just come in and then they do this and then they just leave. And I remember being like super confused. I didn't know where I was. I found my phone, but it was weird. I was in this like really confused state, and I remember holding my phone and I was thinking, maybe my phone recorded what happened. It was a strange thought. Like I was just like holding it and like hoping that something captured what happened. And then, and then it was like I really just kind of got myself to be able to move and collect myself. And then I tried to go to my friend's house that I had been with the night before, but the doors were all locked. It was really weird. And it was a mess, so I was like knocking on the door, but then I thought I better stop that because she has little kids and I didn't want to scare the children. So I went and got in my car and called the police. And then that's where it like all kind of kept going, you know, and then the police are there.
So they come out to you.
Yeah, actually I didn't know where I was in the city either because I was on the Missouri side visiting a friend, and so I had to drive to until I recognized the location I was at.
Oh. This is like pre-GPS and that.
Yeah.
So the police show up,
came,
and like how many police officers?
God, I don't know, a lot. I mean, and that's the other thing is like, it's so weird because at first everybody seems to care, and then like the weeks following, it's like no arrest has been made and nothing's happening. And
so
you know, you see it on the news you see it on like
Law and Order
TV shows, Law and Order and stuff. And you think they're just going to hit the sirens, and the next day you're going to have the guy in custody and you're in court. Actually, that whole process takes like a year and a half. And so you feel very unimportant, but that's a longer story. But then the hospital, and that's where I really realized what happened. I think that's when I was really like...
Well, just to get micro, so the police officers, was your experience of that similar to what was in Unbelievable?
Yeah, they're very like, just the facts, ma'am. Just, you know, the one that really was good is after I got, and the other experience that's similar is telling it over and over, telling it to the first cops, telling it to another cop, telling it to the hospital, then the detective comes and telling it to the detective, and then going downtown and writing it down.
Do you know why they do that?
No, but it's terrible.
Of course it is.
It's like, why are you making people go through this?
I mean,
you know?
Sorry, that would be bad in any case. Like, okay, so someone threw a brick through my window.
Right.
And then I have to like retell this over and over. But as soon as it's something traumatic.
Right.
Like, that's crazy.
Right.
And
but it's like that's where I think they've got the empathy collapse. Like, they can't understand what that's like for you.
And if it's a matter of like, well, we want to make sure we have the fresh recollection. Great, film it right now once and get it, and then move on, and then start all the healing process.
That would be wonderful.
You know? And that's hard because you're still going to have to like...
Yeah.
But, whatever. But it seems like the repetitive part of it is...
Yeah.
And to different people. It's like all these strangers, and you're just like, all these intimate, horrible things happened.
And nobody knew where I was. That's the other thing that I noticed in this show that really captured it, is that you're so alone in it. You're so alone in your terror. You're just like, no one knows I'm here. No one understands what I'm feeling. No one knows what's going on.
Ugh.
You know, even the rape kit at the hospital, like they take all that information. And I remember the woman not really knowing what she was doing. And she didn't know how to work the camera. And I'm a photographer, so I had to teach her how to use the camera.
So let's break that down. So in the show, they depict this. And I had a, verbal or sort of topic sentence understanding of this process.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been through it.
Mm-hmm.
The police show up, they ask you to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
They say you're going to have to go to the hospital and have a physical examination to get DNA samples and check for structural damage, so to speak, and trauma to your body.
Yep.
And take pictures. Anyway, so you go to the hospital in the show, and they swab everything. They swab inside your vagina, they swab outside, they swab your face, they swab, and they're looking for DNA. And they then strip you naked and take pictures of you?
Yeah, and take your clothes and put them in evidence bags. And somebody else has to bring you clothes.
How is that? I mean, I get the forensic side of this.
Right.
But no one's there going like, so I know you've just been victimized, but it's a really great thing if we can get pictures. Is it okay? Like no one asks if it's okay. No one gives you an option of like, could I do this like in an hour? Because right now I just need a glass of water.
Right.
Like no one does that.
No.
They just strip you naked
just take
at the hospital after you've been physically violated.
That's why there's so many levels of violation for survivors. It's the original violation, and then there's the violation of like the coldness of the police, and then the violation at the hospital, and then add on to that later, they never used the rape kit. They never even looked at it, tested anything. And in fact, a few weeks into the situation, I found out that like the hospital had thrown away some important pieces of evidence and
Why?
They were negligent. That's all. And I actually had years later, well, not that many years later, but like a year after, had started working with Missouri State, because it was in the state of Missouri. I started working with the Missouri State rep to create legislation, because I thought about suing the hospital, but you're after an assault, you don't even have the energy to fucking eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Like that, like you can't do any normal things, but they expect you to like deal with legal processes, which are hard on a good day, or like I wasn't going to sue the hospital. I did call them and yell at them and write them and complain and say, please do not do this to anyone else. And then I started working on a piece of legislation with this woman to try to create better collection of forensic evidence for rape victims, and then add on to it. I mean, it's been so nice to see.
What were your recommendations?
One of the big recommendations was to ask them if you think you've been drugged, and to say sometimes people don't know whether or not they've been drugged. I want you to know that we will test for that if you want us to. And that we'll hold on to that evidence. Right. And then also they, the other part of the legislation was just more consent. Like, do you want us to test for this? Do you want us to take this from you? Do you know what this is about?
You're the victim.
Yeah.
Presumably you want the state to catch the bad guy.
Yeah.
So you're on their side. And it's not a fucking emergency. It doesn't have to happen this second. How about a little bit of like, is it okay? Like it'll help us to catch the guy if we can take pictures. Here's how it goes. At least like the question, but the way they depicted it in the show, which from what you're saying,
it's pretty much like that,
is accurate.
Yeah.
And again, this girl, she's young. The whole time I was watching this, especially when she was being questioned by the police officers, I'm sitting there next to my wife. She loves it when I scream at the television. I'm get a fucking lawyer.
Yeah.
Get a fucking lawyer. Why and again, she doesn't have the right to a lawyer because she's not being, convicted of a crime. So they just ferry her through the process. The whole time I'm like, she needs an advocate. She needs someone who knows this process and can be like, whoa. You've already asked her that question.
Yeah.
You have the answer. So let's move on. Yeah. She's already given you that answer. Stop. She's not.
No one would know this. Because like I'm sitting there thinking.
They don't even know what to do.
Right. Like I'm sitting here thinking of the following. Let's say that right now someone broke into my house, let's say, and they stole my TVs. My 20 TVs. I have 20 TVs sitting there waiting to be sold. Okay. They stole my 20 TVs. I don't know what's the process. I mean, I know I'm going to call the cops. Maybe they'll come over. I don't know what I have to fill out. I don't know anything. And that's just about like someone breaking into your house. And let alone if there's some suspect and do I have to go to trial? I have no idea about any of this. So how is an 18-year-old in trauma going to know anything about anything during that process?
Right.
And so, of course, she's just like trusting the system, right?
That was the biggest bust, like bust. I don't know what the right word is, but the biggest like shattering experience was
bubble. Yeah.
Pop bubble. Thank you. Is I was like, oh, the justice system doesn't help me.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, got it. But it took like, you have in your mind, these are the people that are going to help and they know what they're doing. And then it's like, and I don't think that really dawns on you until later. It's kind of also in the moment where you're like, why are you doing that? But you just submit to the whole thing because it's authority, right? You're just like, okay, next thing, But you're right. Like, and I also, honestly, I felt really bad for the woman that was doing my rape kit because I could tell she was really uncomfortable. And she didn't know how to use the camera, and it was making her really embarrassed. And I was like, it's fine. I'm good at photography. Give it to me. I'll set it up.
Yeah.
Like, I just like, what? It felt really frustrating though to be this person that's like more competent in the room, and I'm the one that's supposed to be helped.
Right.
Like,
you would imagine.
It was just like.
You imagine like the Star Trek scenario, right? Like in this advanced post-technological society, and they just know how to.
Forget about Star Trek. Just Law and Order. The way they depict this on TV.
Yeah, I guess.
It's lickety split.
Yeah, I'm imagining like these like really advanced systems and like really make it comfortable for. But I was thinking about how, in this case where they don't even know if there is a person like in the show, the cops you were alluding to this. They're dealing mostly with people that are not being forthcoming. They're lying because, like, did you steal that? No, I don't know what you're talking. Like these kind of things. And I think it's probably a personality type and a type of thing. They just kind of gravitate towards like that suspicion. And so they're like, well, look, I'm just going to assume the world is lying to me because that's what I see every day.
Amen.
So they don't have both a culprit and a dude in a mask show up at the precinct. They have just like a victim they just have this victim. And then they don't see any culprits around. And so then they target all that suspicion towards that victim. And then to your point with the hospital, I mean, that it seems like in this case, it's like you don't have a trained staff ready to go when the rape victim comes in.
Yeah, and you don't have any
some
clothes to
random
give her.
person like,
Right.
oh.
So I don't know if anyone ever does this, but to me, the obvious solution is to have a rape victim advocate, either a volunteer or a paid social worker or something, who's on call. And whenever there's an allegation, they're one of the first people on the scene, and they just sit right next to the victim and explain the situation, give them consent, advocate for them. They're working. They're not against the police. They're not against the hospital, but they're like, oh, I see you're not very good at this. Can you get someone else in here that knows how to take the picture? I see that you're struggling with this.
Yeah.
I don't think you should be practicing with the victim here. I think you should, how about you, because the victim doesn't know to say, who the fuck are you and why are you doing this?
Right.
Or
they do have an advocate. Mine came later, like when I got to the.
But they need to be there
at the
right
hospital.
away.
Yeah.
Step one.
Yeah. Hey, police officer, making her relive the trauma is going to raise the risk of her developing PTSD in the future.
Absolutely.
So you need to back the fuck off.
Yep.
So knock it off. You have the story. She told it to you already. Knock it off. Like, we need that person sitting right next to the victim, because we can't expect us to educate the public on, you should speak up for yourself and da-da-da. So you go to the hospital. Was that as traumatic as they show in Unbelievable? Was it violating and
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
awful?
You've already felt, so much like nothing was your choice, and you don't really who's that stranger? Why is it just okay for people just to shove stuff into me?
Yeah.
Basically, I'm sorry to like be so graphic there, but like and I think that's what kind of happened later on, and I don't know how much we want to talk about the rest of the show, but like there's that feeling of like it's hard enough that this can happen in the world. It makes it so much worse that nobody cares
right
after or does anything about it, or what they do about it harms you more.
Yeah.
So it was not a good, and I've actually years ago, and I was just thinking today, thinking about coming on and talking about this, that I might revisit this idea. One of the things that also happens is when they take your clothes, someone has to bring you clothes. If you don't have a person to bring you clothes, I would like to start some sort of organization or pair up with organizations that provide you clothes. Like my friend came and she brought me like a t-shirt and some sweatpants and some flip-flops, but that was like, what I had, that was it. And then the next step was being outside of the hospital and in a car with a strange man who says he's my detective and he's taking me to the police station, and I'm sitting there without a bra or underwear on, and you just feel so like women like to wear their bra, like that's like you're at home or you're around somebody you're comfortable with when you take the bra off at the end of the day. But when you're just kind of like sitting in a car with a strange man after what's happened, and you're like, can I have a bra? Can someone give me some underwear? Can something different happen? Like, I get mad about it now, and I would love to I started looking at it years ago where I was like, what could we do to like at least have like kind of some one size fits all sports bra situations, a couple of different sizes, maybe an organization that helps provide this to hospitals as like a resource, Otherwise, if you don't have someone to bring you clothes, I think they give you like paper clothes, like the kind that the police carry around in their car.
Yeah, it's like, one, treating people like they're Auschwitz prisoners. Two, it's almost like, they passed legislation in certain states that they were trying to make abortions illegal, but they couldn't manage it. So they decided to make it mandatory to do an invasive sonogram that involved basically a giant, for lack of a better term, implement,
probe
cylinder that is that's placed up someone's vagina, which is a real probe that they will use under certain circumstances. But they made it by law mandatory against physicians' recommendations. Like, okay, on some rare cases we need this implement.
Right.
I actually know sonographers who talk about when they would need that, and it's actually not very common. But they made it by law mandatory. Why? Because they want to disincentivize
make it
abortions.
As painful as possible already, on top of how painful it is.
Yeah, it's almost like the system wants to suppress victims coming forward.
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I joined so many groups of women afterwards, and and that's the other thing I want to say for any survivors out there listening is you don't have to report it. You can do whatever you want to do. If you feel safer not reporting it, don't report it. If you feel like you want to report it because you're worried about it, know what that entails. But it's okay to not, but it does discourage. I know so many women that were like, oh, hell no, I would never get them involved. I know that it's worse. And I was like, I did not know that.
That's terrible.
And my mind was more like, this guy seemed like he did it before. That was another thing I really felt was like, it was obvious to me that this is not his first time. And
it rarely is.
Right. And I felt the sense of duty to protect other people, to be like, don't go out and hurt more people. But I know a lot of survivors feel really bad about not reporting, though. So don't feel bad out there.
Right.
If you're listening, do not feel bad. You had to do whatever you had to do to protect yourself, and that is okay.
Hey, listen, like for most of history, sadly, and right now still in some place of the world, it wasn't just about like, oh, I know it's pretty uncomfortable if I report it. It's like, well, no, you will die. Because the idea was, and I think this is what's permeated everything, the problem isn't that you got raped. The problem is infidelity outside of marriage and immorality.
Right.
And mostly we're talking about guys here. And so like, still unbelievably in places in this world, if you get raped, you're going to get killed.
Yes.
Because you've sinned.
Right.
You brought dishonor on the family.
Yeah.
Well, and why were you drinking in the first place? What were you doing? And thing we should point out is that we have listeners all over the world.
Yeah.
A third of our listeners don't live in the United States.
Yes.
And not that the United States is, a glowing beacon as we're, talking about here of justice, particularly when it comes to this.
We're actually worse than a lot of countries when it comes to
We can be
rape.
worse, but we're a lot better than a lot of countries as well.
Yes, true.
And we have listeners in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
I have women who email me from Saudi Arabia
Wow.
and tell me what it's like to live in that society. So we're to some people, we're talking about the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So that needs to be pointed out as well.
Absolutely. Like that you could even report it ever or consider it
right.
By
as
the
an
way,
option.
sorry.
Or even go out by yourself for that matter.
Or even go out by yourself or have a drink.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or show yourself.
One thing you just said reminded me of something. So you were talking about the invasiveness of some of the hospital procedures.
Mm-hmm.
So I have luckily never been raped in any form like that. But
You've been assaulted.
I've been assaulted, yeah. But
sexually,
right,
which
absolutely.
one could consider rape.
Right,
Yes.
absolutely. But I do remember this. So I was in a bad car crash when I was 18. I was a passenger in this one car. And when I was being taken into the hospital, as a matter of routine, I guess, they try to check for hernias or something. So as they're wheeling me through the hallway, someone stuck a finger in my anus.
Oh my God.
And it's like a thing they do. They're like, I even remember, it's like, check such and such or what.
And they're like, okay.
But it's like, I was like, whoa, and I'm sitting there like hurt and like, I barely know what's going on. It felt so violating.
Oh.
And I hadn't just been raped. I was just in a hospital. But I was hurt physically. And just like that idea of like, oh, I'm just like this piece of meat. And granted, there is this reality that if you are really seriously, especially if you're having a heart attack or whatever, to some extent, the doctors do need to mangle your body a bit because they need to try to get in, maybe pull out your lung, whatever the heck they have to do, right? And I get that.
But let me give it like a similar scenario.
Right.
Like let's say you had let's say I have no idea, but let's say there was a hernia procedure check that involved like potentially rupturing your anus. You know, let's say there was some kind of thing where they could stick up there that would potentially damage you.
Some percentage chance it's gonna
in the process of checking for this other thing. They would evaluate that risk. They would say like, well, we want to check for
because
hernia.
there's a physical risk,
but there's a 10% risk of us actually causing more damage by doing this procedure. Well, guess what? When you do this sort of thing to people, there's a psychological damage. There is psychological damage. There's a percentage risk of psychological damage. And so wake up, people. Like, we have brains and things happen inside of our brain. Like, wake the fuck up. And so as they're administering these checks, even just for your example, they should have said, like, okay, there's a risk that this person has been raped and or this is going to feel like a rape. So how about we figure that in to our scenario, and maybe there's a thing you can do, like you come, they come down to your level and they're like, by the way, sir, we have to check for a hernia. Is it okay if I put my digit up your butt?
Yes, consent.
It'll help you. And if you're like, fuck no, then it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna read that as a indicator that this person is likely to incur psychological damage if I forge ahead.
Yeah, we'll ask again in 10 minutes.
Like, and we'll ask again in 10 minutes.
They're not bleeding from the anus. By the way, there's a lot of things about that night that I don't remember. There are moments, of course, that are embedded in my memory, right? That's one of them. So I'm not trying to say like this is the worst trauma of my life. I'm just saying like those little things, even though I wasn't a rape victim, but it was an invasion of my body that I was not expecting. So I cannot even begin to imagine when I did just get raped, and now I'm being like more invaded.
Right.
And I don't understand what's happening and why this is happening. Like,
so then afterwards, Christy, you are taken to the police station and they question you yet again.
Yes.
Just like in Unbelievable.
Yes. And in this case, I was grateful. There was a victim advocate there, and I don't remember. I think she just provided emotional support, and the detective asked his assistant or somebody to come in and I guess he wasn't a very fast typer, and he didn't want me to have to write it up. So I was going to say it all again, but this woman was typing it up. So here you are again, like just me and like 3 strangers all kind of hearing the worst thing that I ever, I think that's the other thing is like women are just, I mean, I think men can fear it too, but I think women fear it. We're taught to fear this from an early age. Don't get raped, don't draw attention, don't be too much, whatever, all that victim blaming kind of conditioning. So like for me, it was always kind of the worst possible thing that could happen to me, even though I was assaulted, but molested as a child. So that was my first sexual experience. And I won't even say sexual, but that was my first sexual assault. It was at 5 years old. Right. So I think all my life I thought, oh no, this could happen again, and the rape was the final straw for me in a lot of ways, because there had been stalkers and I'd been attacked twice by people I didn't know who were trying to force me to do sexual things. And I was just like, oh my God, like after a while, it's hard not to have that schema, right? Like that, okay, this is really dangerous.
Schema of the world is dangerous.
Scheme of the world is dangerous.
Men are evil. I am worthless.
Yeah, and nobody cares what happens to you, like nobody's really going to do anything. And that's the thing that was really hard about the whole process is they drag you through all of that and then they do nothing.
So that's what happened to you?
Well, that was where it went to, was like, so I went to the police station and then we wrote all that up, and then I had called my mom and she came and picked me up, and I remember being really tired and really mad, and there was I'm leaving out some pretty awful details as well, just because I don't think I can say them, but my mom and my stepdad came and got me, and they were really sweet, but it was also like frustrating again that so much attention was on me. And I went home and I took a shower at my mom's house, and when I came upstairs, she had made breakfast and she'd like put everything out really nicely on the table, and like we were going to sit down and chat kind of breakfast. And I remember being really angry, and I was like, this isn't a fucking event. Right. I was just like, can I just eat some goddamn food and go hide in bed for maybe like 2 weeks, Yeah. And my mom is so sweet. Like I literally said that to her. And she was just like, okay, whatever,
Right.
She's really good at like managing that. And I really appreciated that.
Great. And your mom knows enough to say she's been through something really rough.
Yeah.
She's going to be in a bad mood.
Yeah. I was just so tired.
And I'm glad she's telling me what she wants. I took a stab at what I thought she might want. Yeah. And she told me otherwise. Great. Now I know. Yeah. In the show, Unbelievable, they don't, the characters around Marie don't have those kinds of reactions.
Oh, that support group?
Yeah.
That support group? I was so upset.
Of the other kids?
Yeah, I'm like, oh,
well, that was
God.
after she had falsely said that she lied.
But wouldn't they, that's my point, is like, I guess I know it's just a show, and I'm just being shown what the show is showing me.
But it's a good thing to be angry about.
Right, but me, the viewer, I'm like, but don't you see? Don't you see what's happening?
So I'm going to go on a little tangent, and this is a little off topic, but while we're on this topic, is that was probably the only thing I didn't like about this show, was that they didn't give enough background to why perfectly reasonable, empathic people would be so oblivious to what was happening, namely the two foster mothers and the 2 counselors. You expect other people to be a little oblivious, but you would expect the 2 counselors who seem to have empathy and care. You would expect the foster parents, I guess the 3 foster parents, to be more on the side, because why would you become a foster parent if you're kind of a dick or sort of oblivious? And the thing that I didn't like about the show was that there's 2 things that could have happened. One is that it's totally accurate depiction, and Marie was a perfectly reasonable person who was not believed, which happens, and was totally failed by everyone based on just our biases and our prejudice and sexism and whatnot. But a much more likely scenario, because I've worked with so many clients like this. I haven't really said that yet. I worked with so many young girls like this. And as I was watching the show, they hinted at it at times, and I read into it much more detail. They showed two things. They showed her dancing on a picnic table in a mildly sexual way, very awkward way, which I thought was accurate in terms of acting out of a teenager. And then she blows out the candles of another foster kid.
Yeah.
That was the extent of her bad behavior.
Right.
These kinds of kids, and I don't know if Marie was one of those people, but given her history, the kinds of misbehavior that these kids exhibit is extreme. It sounds like, because it sounds like she's been in the foster system since she was 3 years old or something like that. That the attachment injuries she's been through and the amount of acting out, like lying all the time, using drugs, not following the rules, breaking curfew, promiscuity. Not that there's anything wrong with having sex, but, to foster parents that are trying to wrangle these kids, using drugs in the house, stealing stuff from other kids in the house, stealing stuff from the parents' wallet and stuff, running away, dropping out of school, skipping school, yelling at foster parents, yelling at teachers. I don't know if Marie did that. Maybe she didn't. But the way they were telling the story, it was like they were hinting at a history of that would contribute to the foster parents being a little bit skeptical. What I would have liked to have seen, but I get why they didn't do it, because they wanted to make Marie likable, I think. And maybe it's accurate. That's another possibility. But I suspect Marie, if we really talked to the foster parents and said, like, what did you know and or see up until that point? They'd be like, she had lied to me thousands of times up until that point. There were times when I couldn't trust anything she said to me. That is a common presentation that therapists like me and Christy know very well. And it doesn't mean you don't believe the kids when they've been raped. That's not what it means. What it means is that people who don't know better, like foster parents and maybe young youth workers at a home,
and friends and family
in particular, they have a track record that leads them to at least question. The way that the foster mother sort of came up with their suspicion. It's, as you're watching it, Umberto, right, from your point of view, you're just like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you...
What did you think about that?
Well, I just felt like, I did see those two scenes that you're talking about, and I thought, well, sure, okay, so they're concerned that she lies and all these things.
But it seemed to come out of nowhere. But they didn't set it up,
because it wasn't like, well, she's done this before, remember?
Right.
Like, remember the time she said Billy raped her?
Right.
Okay, but by the way, quick parentheses. I had a girlfriend in high school who... When I was getting to know her and stuff like that, she confided in me that an ex-boyfriend of hers had tried to rape her. Now, that may have happened. Then later in our relationship, she confided in me that this other ex-boyfriend of hers had also tried to rape her. Then she confided in me on like a third one.
Yeah.
And then she confided in one of my friends that I tried to rape her. And so it's like... I don't know how many times or whatever. Like, I don't know what happened. There must have been some trauma, right?
Yeah.
But I certainly could see, like, if someone came to me, it's like, oh, did you hear such and such? I would take it with a grain of salt. I'd be like, well, that might be, but I have this data. They didn't set it up this way at all. They set it up as in, like, well, she acted out a couple times. Now she's and
barely. She danced on a picnic table, and she blew out someone's candles. I just want to say that's the background. And if that's the extent of
my
her
mom would have been
misbehavior,
happy if that's how well behaved I was.
There was, you've had clients like this when you were at internship. It was a daily occurrence, and so. Again, I don't know. Maybe Marie was a very well-behaved person. That certainly can happen. But it seemed to me like the likelihood was... So that was the one thing I didn't like about the show, was that it sort of what I think, because I think this show is great because it's educational and and entertaining. It's a very entertaining show, and it's also very informative. And I think it educates people on a lot of things. But I think the one thing it didn't, I think, really nail is that there's a certain sliver of our population who have been thrown around in foster care, abandoned by their parents, drug addicted parents, and have tremendous attachment injury and tremendous issues that play out when they're teenagers, that result in a lot of lying and a lot of personality issues, a lot of acting out, often, promiscuity, dipping into that, drug use. And for those people, they become targets for victimization by predators because they know that those particular people are sometimes they have mechanisms that kick in that actually cause them to quote unquote go along with the assault, and two, no one's going to believe them because they're already completely marginalized anyway. And this is a real thing,
right?
And so I felt like they didn't really depict that. The other thing is that you can walk away from this show thinking that foster parents are basically kind of like dumbasses, and foster parents are some of them. They're saints. I mean, how many people volunteer to take in
Good point.
some of the most misbehaving, by definition, kids in your county? Right. These people, and they don't get paid enough. These people are saints, and they depicted these women as not evil, but not great.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's kind of a classism thing, I think.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I think that I don't know, I think that they're like, oh, they're not that worldly, even though they're helping kids, especially because they're helping kids, they haven't gone out in the world more. They're too busy taking care of difficult children or whatever. So there's this sense that they have a limited experience in the world. I feel like that's how they were portrayed in this show, at least.
I see.
And I think that also, well, first of all, I think you're right. Foster parents are saints, but also they can be bad and they have hurt kids just like real parents can.
Yep.
And that's all there. But as you were talking, especially about the marginalized stuff and the fact that someone that's that marginalized will be targeted, that's an important thing to say on here, I feel, is I started to realize I had to fight tooth and nail to get to go to trial to prosecute. If I was a woman of color, the most believable survivors or victims, and I use those words interchangeably, the most believable are white women who are married.
Sure.
And it's somebody else outside the marriage. But if you're single, if you're young, if you're poor, if you're of color, if you're an immigrant, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
If you're addicted to heroin,
if you're a drug addict,
if you're homeless,
if you're mentally ill,
if you have schizophrenia,
if you're disabled,
if you have Alzheimer's,
right?
There's if you're
very
elderly,
vulnerable populations.
If you're prone to magical thinking, like that one woman, there's certain people who we just sort of write off and go well, you can't believe any.
The thing that was about the moms, I felt somewhat, wow, man, I wish they, but it was the counselors that struck me the most. I was like, wait, you encouraged her to go back, first of all, and now you're just assuming that that's the end of the story, and you're just mad at her,
right?
Like, wait,
and they kicked her out, and then she gets fired from her job because she's yelling at her friend. There were certain things where, again, could have happened, but to me, it would have been, I think, even a better story to show, and they showed a little bit of this, when she was trying to get the sheets at the store, and she acted out a little bit there. And apparently that was a true story based on her account of what happened, which makes total sense. It's just you kind of get locked in, I want my original sheets. This is hard,
I want this thing that happened to me to not have happened, is what she was really wanting. Story. Yeah, does this have to be this way?
Right. And so the way they portrayed it, it was aside from those little incidents, it was she was just being totally reasonable. And again, could have happened that way. But a typical 18-year-old who is developmentally like a 13-year-old or even a 5-year-old because of the traumas that they've been through tend to react in, I mean, you were 33 years old and you're with your mom and you were pretty snotty to her.
Yeah. I think actually as we were talking about this, I think I realized I was oppressed through the rape. I had no power.
And you wanted to...
And then I had no power in the justice system. And then I had no power at the hospital. And I had no power everywhere. And I think once I got home, I was just like, I have power here.
Right. I want to exert... That
and
was
I didn't
kind of...
mean to hurt her or be mad, but I was like, I was mad and I hadn't had a chance to express it to anyone yet.
Yeah. The analogy I always give is you're teaching your kid to ride a bicycle and you let go of the bike and the kid immediately crashes and skins their, knee on the asphalt. And you walk up and you go like, well, get up on the bike, try it again. The kid's like, no, I don't want to. You don't like slap the kid across the face and say, you're a quitter, you motherfucker. You're just like, okay, he's hurt. I get it. I'm not going to take his outburst as an indication of some kind of personality flaw.
This isn't a literal situation.
Yeah.
So and not a typical behavior for,
Someone just went through something, I stubbed my toe and my wife asked me to take out the garbage. I'm going to be like, in a second, I'm not going to be like, it's fine. People understand that. And the same is true about events like this.
Yep.
I will say, for example, 9 years ago, I had a thing happen to me where a relative of mine had borrowed a whole bunch of money and did not pay it back. And it was a lot of money, right? And I was in this argument with my mom about it. I was at her house and, I think she was trying to tell me how I needed to, how I should behave about it, whatever, and say. And I got so irate. I stood up, I yelled, and I left her house, and on the way out, I slammed her front door so hard, it just broke off the hinges. And I walked like a mile and finally cooled down and came back, and I had to apologize profusely and offer to pay for the door, all these things. This was not a rape situation. It was traumatic in other ways, and I wasn't 18. It was just 9 years ago.
Right.
But it was stressful.
Did your mom understand that you
actually,
were...
surprisingly... Maybe I'm not giving her enough credit, but they were very understanding.
About the door.
Yeah, about the whole outburst.
Yeah.
Which, anyways, but the point is...
I think that's the thing about family is sometimes there's safety to have those big emotions.
Right. Like at the store when Marie is trying to get the cheese.
Yes.
So for you, you're at home, you say... let's not make this a big thing.
Yeah.
You have your breakfast, you take a shower, you hole up in your bedroom. Then what happened?
This is kind of a weird part of the story, but I was supposed to have lunch with my dad, and I have a lot of unhappy connections to my father that something in the rape triggered that I could.
And your parents weren't together, so.
Yeah, they weren't together.
Oh, not your stepdad.
My real father, yeah. And if some of it was like around when I was 5 and molested, he didn't think we should go to the police. He was like, she's just going to forget about it. It's not a big deal. He didn't care and he didn't react. And there's some other things that I kind of knew about him that were problematic to me around the way he treated women. And I had to call him and tell him that I wasn't coming to lunch. I didn't tell him what happened, but I just said, look, I'm sick. And he was really mad at me. And he was like, come on, come to lunch. My friends were going to meet you. And he was just pissed at me. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm sick and I'm going to bed. And actually, that's the last time I've ever spoken to him.
Really?
I haven't talked to my dad for, 10 years now. So, because it was August 27th of 2006.
So in a better society with different biases and different assumptions, you could say to him, I was just raped.
Yeah.
I can't meet you. And I don't want to talk about it with you right now.
Right.
We'll talk about it later, maybe.
And he would know almost all of what that entails.
Yeah, he would be like, oh my God.
Right. But I knew he would not react well.
Right. Because he probably wouldn't.
Right. I knew he couldn't.
And even if he had whatever, the point is, he was no longer a neutral agent in this story for you.
It became very clear to me that he wasn't. Yeah. And I was mad that, I mean, it was, I thought it would go it could go several ways. One where he would like downplay it or victim blame me, or another where he would, say, just forget about it, it's better to move on, or another where he would say like, I'm going to go kill him. And I just want to say to all the people who want and have that natural urge to go hurt someone who's hurt someone you love, after a person has already been a victim of violence, the last thing they want is someone else doing violence without their consent. So sometimes it's not a great thing to say. You might be able to say, I wish I could. I wish I could hurt them for you, or like I feel that tendency. But there are people who will seriously grab their guns and their bats and go.
Right. And they think they're serving the victim.
They think, but what they're really doing is they're taking the power out of the victim's hands again. By just doing whatever they want to do, not what the victim would want.
Yeah, and to extend that, generally speaking, is when a victim, and this was depicted with the second detective in Colorado. Yeah. Where as she comes to the victim, she's like, so this is up to you. What do you want to do? Yes. And so it's not just like, would you like me to go stab him? If you're a friend, right? I want to stab him, but do you want me to stab him? Right. Maybe you want me to stab him, and I'll go stab him. But the broader thing of just like, I want to report this. So someone comes to you and says they were raped last night, either a kid or something. Even if it's a 5-year-old kid, it's your own kid. Mm-hmm. A key principle to follow is do what the victim, survivor, wants to do. Right. Put it in their hands. Would you like to report it? I will support you on reporting it. What do you want to do? Right. To do otherwise risks often, again, overpowering and dominating this person yet again. Yep. And putting them in a position where they're like, well, not only does no one care, but now everyone that's supposed to care about me, my loved ones, also don't really care. They're all just operating on their own needs. Yes. When is anyone going to stop and ask me what I fucking need right now? Yeah. And it's good intentioned. They're trying to care, but they haven't been taught to be sensitive to the state of a victim. Right. And that for many victims, survivors, they might not know what they want right away. And so you just have to say, when you're ready, I'll be here. You know what I mean? Yes. Oh my God. Yes. I mean, I think that's the thing too, that like, even though I would have prosecuted and I would have gone forward, like actually the whole thing just went so fast out of my control, where it was like, now I'm at the hospital, now I'm doing this, and oh, I guess this is what's happening, like you didn't really have any chance to get your bearings. Oh, you're on rails. Yeah, you're just like, oh, and this is what's happening now. And, I think, I don't know what the answer to that would be, because I think it's just one of those situations where like you have to figure out what you're going to do. Right. In the moment, and once that ball is in motion, here we go. Yeah, and again, it's easily solved by having an advocate that's there right away, and letting the victim consent to such searches. Yeah. Police officers can't enter your house and start searching for things unless there's, it's lawful. In the same way, you can't. If you're going to take a rape kit and all that information, use it. Don't leave it sitting for years. But even before that step, consent from the human needs to be given, and informed consent. And there has to be an advocate there that's so what this person is saying to you is that you have a choice to do A or B or C, and here are the implications. A will, if we actually go forward with the rape kit right now, this is what you'll have to go through. Yeah, no, they did not. But it will help because it's right away and it's official, and they might actually find something that will actually help us to find the perpetrator. But but you can say no if you want to say no, but that limits our ability to catch this guy. It doesn't eliminate our ability because we have other ways. And or you go, C, how about you sit here and we will tell you where to put the Q-tip.
That would have been amazing.
You know what I mean?
You know,
like,
something like that would have been great.
Yeah, like your DNA is already in there anyway. So you touching it with your hands, or we'll put gloves on your hands.
Right.
You grab the Q-tip. I need you to put the Q-tips here.
That's a great idea.
That one you don't want to do. How about you just do the 3 other Q-tip swabs? You know, you don't want to do the inside one, do the outside one. You know, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. You know, and it doesn't. And I'm not even an expert on this. I'm just throwing this shit out of the top of my head right now. Certainly, we can figure this out, right?
That's a helpful perspective. Go ahead, Umberto.
Oh, sorry. The thing we can trust from all this is that I don't have any sense that anyone's done the good analysis to conclude that wouldn't be a good idea.
Right.
So it's not like, well, yeah, we've tried all these methods and none of them work, right? And really, the sense I get is there are some procedures. Who knows when they came up with them? No one's really audited what's damaging to the person or not mentally.
And just to get back to the original point that I said a while ago, that the system is set up to actually purposefully by some people to actually suppress people from coming forward. That's a very real thing. It might be hard for some people to imagine, easy for others. There are a patriarchal, people in power who actually are incredibly inconvenienced by women's allegations of sexual assault. And in their head, 50% to 75% are either lies or, below the threshold of what would really be considered a crime. And they believe that, in their logic, that, well, if someone's really been raped, then they're going to be willing to go through this. And for those who are lying, this process will be a deterrent, because there are similar things in.
Oh wow! Yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that.
I know that's a factor in this.
Absolutely.
Because there are other mechanisms like this actually. Like actually in our field, one of the things that I've actually even proposed to some people, because there are some kids who will threaten suicide in a false way, and we've determined that. We've it's very rare. It's comparatively pretty rare. Most people who actually alert I'm suicidal, they're absolutely. And most people don't actually report they're suicidal. But there are some people who repeatedly cry wolf, and it's determined that and they do it in these strategic moments. They're about to be punished, and I'm suicidal. And what we recommend to families and to systems is to take it seriously and say, okay, we need to do a full evaluation of your suicidal allegation. And we might have to monitor you 24/7. And so this is a proper response, but it's set up to be a little bit annoying and doesn't actually reinforce the behavior. We can maybe make that another topic for another podcast episode. But it is not an uncommon mindset to have a strategy to suppress what you believe to be people who are lying. But the thing is like to treat every victim like they might be lying.
Right.
Yeah, imagine.
And that is the case in court. You are there to, they presume that he's guilty, or not guilty.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
in court, you're the one on trial.
Right.
The victim.
Yeah.
Imagine if this happened with a murder. So
Right.
you have this body, and I don't even talk about the personal report. You have the body, and you're like, well, I mean, we just got to make sure that this body is dead, right? And like that they really got killed. So we're going to let it sit here for a while. And depending on how much people cry about it, how much, no one does this, right? But it's like, it is this very different standard for,
Right.
Look, I like your point here, because this is something I hadn't considered. We all know, wink, wink, that most of these are just like, someone got a little carried away, sure. But haven't we all? And that's the attitude. And so therefore it's like, we don't really need to be worried that most of these are real absolute rapes. Yeah. if they were, well, that would be a problem. And then the reality is they are. And it is a problem. And it's incredibly inconvenient. And, oh, man, disheartening.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, honestly, like, my biggest, hardest time was when I was like, I don't want to live in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, and I see that in the story.
And the same with Unbelievable.
Yeah, just, I if it's like this, it's weird because I've been reflecting on it, and I'm like, I don't know that it's so much that I couldn't live in a world where bad stuff happens. It's I can't live in a world where bad stuff happens and bad guys know they can get away with it and no one cares.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it's like, that's why I became such an activist, was I was like, well, either I have to be a force to make this change, or I'm just jumping ship.
Yeah. So I want to get to that. But before that, did they catch the guy?
They did. This is one of the things that I think is most important for people to understand about the legal system, is it's never, ever like you think it's going to be, and each case is different, and there's a lot of convoluted pieces and parts to it. But so, yeah, the next steps were, after I slept for a while, the detective that was assigned to my case called and said, we have found some suspects that fit the description, and I had to pick him out. But they brought, instead of me going, this was one good thing they did, is instead of bringing me back to the station or having those people brought in, they brought photographs of everyone to my house.
How did they know where to look? Did they just go to the party and say?
The vicinity, yeah. The people who knew the people at the party. And
just on the description, like, oh, these
Yep.
these three people kind of fit the description.
Yeah.
So someone said, oh, yeah, John was there and Frank was there. And
Yeah.
they went to those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then got their images, and then the detective brought that to the house. And then I was like, that's him right there. You know, the hard part was that they did not apprehend him for like 3 or 4 weeks. And I had to go back to Seattle to work. So also, like in Unbelievable, I lost my job. I did go on disability for a while, but couldn't return in time to keep my job.
Why'd you lose your job?
Well, just because I tried to go back to work, and you know, I had to tell. I was a week late coming back from my vacation, so I had to tell my boss what happened, and then I just wasn't able to function. Like, I was crying all the time.
Just like in the
yeah, you just can't function. Like, I felt so bad in Unbelievable. That's the hardest part, is when you're like reeling from this. There are still people out there that are like, where's my coffee? You know, or like they have their different like normal agenda of what they need from the world or how they want you to behave. And you're just not in that place. Like my boss or coworkers that knew would come sometimes to just check on me. Like, all it took was someone to say, are you okay? How are you doing today? And I'd just start crying. And I'd
so
be
no
like,
one offered, hey, how about take a few weeks off?
That's what my boss ended up doing. She was amazing. And she was like, you know, you can take disability. And so I did that. But, you know, honestly, I was not really, like, because I was still going through the legal system, and I had PTSD, and I couldn't sleep at night because it happened. Like, I woke up, so like sleeping is really tough for me.
Did you have a therapist at the time?
Yes. Yeah.
Was your therapist helpful?
Not really. Like, honestly, she was okay, but she was more of a psychologist that would like sit there and just listen and not.
So we have a lot of therapists. Half of the listeners are therapists. What would you tell them that they should do?
I think be a little more engaged. You know, I just felt like she was just kind of waiting for the hour to be over.
Really?
In a way, like...
You just went through something horrific, and you just got the impression like she was...
And she'd be like, well, see you next week. And maybe I don't have an accurate memory of what it was like because I was so in turmoil. But she did end up diagnosing me with PTSD to help with the... which I had, but also helped with the disability.
Well, I suspect...
And then also, while the trial was going on, the defense attorneys subpoenaed my notes And I had a private investigator following me around, which I didn't know until we were wrapping up.
Who sent the investigator?
The defense attorneys.
Oh my God.
So they were like, I didn't know someone was following me around.
What did the private investigator find?
Nothing, because I did nothing, because that's the one thing that was that I could hold on to.
They were probably trying to find you like drinking and having sex, right?
Yeah, they were probably trying
as
to,
if
like,
that is relevant.
Right. They were probably, I don't know, they were looking for anything they could get, but like
what could you possibly find?
Nothing.
Can we think of anything that would hold up as a defense that could be anything? Like,
yes, I can think of something. She regularly stalks the night streets with fake kits to plant evidence.
Yeah.
And
yes,
you like
right.
frame people.
Right.
Like seriously, because let's say that
she drinks a lot, she has sex a lot.
They're out every night partying, they do drugs, they're embezzling funds from the bank. Irrelevant.
Totally. It was very
but
baffling.
Convincing to a jury.
Right. And I did not know until everything wrapped up that my prosecuting attorney
spied on you.
Told me that the defense spied on me. The only things that they got a hold of that they thought would be helpful in their case was that I was on antidepressants. And so they were like, you must be crazy and making this all up. And I was like, how is that okay? This was during the deposition. And then they asked me if I'd ever accused someone of sexual crime before. And I was like, yeah, when I was 5 years old, my mom drove me to the police station to report my molestation. And the guy,
there's a pattern.
That's exactly. They were like, so you've made a false report before.
A false? Wait, they said a false report?
Right. So
I was like,
that's when you're on the stand.
No, this was in the deposition room.
Okay.
So
correct me if I'm wrong, but that was traumatic too.
Oh my God, there was nothing more traumatic. My cat had died a week before my deposition, and I was like, I'd had her for 15 years. I was in total grief. I had to fly home to Kansas. I hated being in the same city where it happened. I had never actually met my prosecuting attorney in person until that day. I had two men across the table from me just
blasting
me with a stenographer in the room, and my mom couldn't come in the room. It was just me and my...
They're dominating you.
Yeah.
They're accusing you of things.
Yeah.
One could say mentally raping you again.
Yeah.
Delegitimizing your trauma from when you were little.
Like 5 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy who molested me when I was 5 years old told me that if I told anyone, he would kill my parents. So I didn't tell for a long time so it went on. But then when I accidentally said something that my mom caught, we figured it out and moved forward. And my dad was like, she'll forget. But my mom was like, we're going to go to the police, because there was another little girl that was reporting the same thing, because he used to take us in there together. So we were going to the police station. I cried the whole way to the police station because I thought they were going to put me in jail. At 5 years old, I'd already internalized victim blaming.
Right.
Right? I knew that I was the bad one. Or my mind couldn't get around all the things that were happening. But
right, and to be clear,
man skipped town, so we couldn't ever pursue it.
So to be clear about the mechanism, or to speculate about how a 5-year-old could internalize that, because it's like, well, it's not like they're TV shows depicting kids accusing people of rape and being put in jail. The messages to kids is that pretty much anything sexual is shameful.
Yes.
Anything about your body, particularly the young girls, is shameful. And so it's not a leap to say, to do this. Surely it's such an extension of, the shameful talk that surely I'm going to be put in jail.
Well, you haven't even had that shameful talk. It's even worse than that at 5, because I had never had a sexual talk with anyone at 5.
But you were given messages that your body and that sexuality was shameful.
Don't talk to strangers.
Well, and also don't talk about sex.
Little girls get a lot more, which is unfortunate, because I listened to your podcast on the sex slavery situation, and I really thought his point was really important, that women are taught to hover over and protect and tell their small girls to watch out, but nobody does that for boys.
Right.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I don't remember people telling me anything about strangers at all. But what my point is that all I learned about sex, I learned from my abuser in that moment. So, it's like mine was a little different in that I didn't have a fear of authorities, or it never crossed my mind, oh, this is something I should report. What I thought, though, was this is our little secret. And I certainly can't let daddy or anyone know, because we'll all be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like an authorities like cops. It was in trouble with the adults,
Oh, yeah.
But I certainly thought of that, like, because all my memories were very pleasant. Like,
yes.
oh, this is a cool club I'm in, right? But I certainly had that feeling of, oh, but I can never mention this because we'd all be in trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So then they convict him.
No.
Oh.
So then we go through trial. Well, first, before, I had gotten a call while I was at work saying they weren't going to prosecute. And I'd already talked to my detective and who took the man's statement. And my detective said he has a partial confession. He said he's sorry. He knew what he did was wrong. So, like, he pretty much confessed, at least partially, but then he kind of started going, but I didn't do it like she said. And, like, I guess they never let me read it, but he did tell me this. And I was, like, waiting for the results. I called the hospital to wait for the results from the urine to see if it had shown positive for date rape drugs. And they said, oh, that's been sent out for testing. It'll be about 6 weeks or something. And I talked to my detective and told him this, and he called the hospital, and he called me back, and he said, they're lying to you. They threw it out. And so I was like, what? But all this is kind of happening. And then the attorney's office calls me and says, we're not prosecuting. This is too much of a he said, she said case. And I was like, what? I was like, what about the
It's not a he said, she said. It's a criminal saying he didn't do it.
Exactly.
How many criminal? It's not he said, she said. It's victim criminal said.
Mm-hmm.
How about, we think about that.
Right. And here's the thing is,
like I saw that man break into my house and take my TV, and he had a gun, and that's the guy. How many times it's like, well, he said, she said.
Right. And that's the thing
like,
that made
what?
me so mad is I was like, what you're saying is what he says matters more than what she says.
Right. Or equally or something.
Yes.
It's like, he's the criminal.
Not
Right.
equally, because they didn't take him and put stuff in his anus.
Yeah.
Right. And
is it a mystery that he's gonna lie and say he didn't do it? Like, is that mind-boggling to you?
But then my detective said the reason they do this, he's like, Christy, he's like, honestly, if you got a pile of rape cases on the corner of your desk, just push it into the trash can, because they do not want to fuck with it. They don't care. They don't want to go through the time it takes. They don't want to have, and the attorneys that prosecute these cases and the defense attorneys, they're voted in. I forget what that means, but they're like voted in, and they want a win record. So everybody's more concerned about themselves than they are about the victim. Am I going to win this case? Is that going to look good on my record? Like,
because they get elected.
Yes.
By
elected official. That's what it is. Exactly. So basically I fought and I said, I want to talk to your higher up. This is wrong. I know there's a partial confession. And he was like, there is? And I was like, oh my God, they never even read. They just didn't read it.
Now,
and so I finally got someone
aren't evil.
who did it.
They are largely underfunded.
Overworked,
underfunded. Mainly, we need more prosecutors, essentially. So, again, it's a systemic problem.
Yep.
The prosecutors aren't evil. It's we do not pay enough taxes, or we put taxes towards stupid things and not towards things like this.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But what would solve it is tax cuts.
Yeah.
Right. For the rich. Yeah. But no, so then it was like, I was just like, I can't. Oh, and that was the moment when I was like, what do you mean you're not going to prosecute? And they were like, well, I was like, I said I want to. And they were like, well, rape's a crime against the state, not against you, so you don't really get to decide that.
Which is technically true. I mean,
it is 100% true. Yeah. And it kind of harkens back to like women being property.
Right. So, and again, if it was a different sort of a case.
Yeah.
That was traditionally not related to gender or even towards males, or towards upper class males. Let's just put it that way.
Because my rapist was an attorney also.
Really?
Yes.
So that's interesting. So the part of it is the sexism in our society is just a general, even for women prosecutors, is a general discounting of crimes that happen to women.
Totally.
And that isn't even to point out, I believe, that statistically, as a person of color, you're more likely to be raped than a non-person of color. As a poor person, you're more likely to be raped than a rich person. As a marginalized person, as a LGBTQ person, you're more likely to be raped than a straight cis person. And guess what? Totally in line with our oppression and marginalization of these groups.
Right.
And when they speak up, one, people don't listen. Two, they've been taught not to speak up. Women have been taught to just put up with it. And so yeah, it's just.
And can we also talk about the men who get off of rape? White men. White men are the primary rapists,
right, like
white men are the ones who get off. We still have this kind of story in our culture online that it's the men of color that are going to rape you, but it's actually white men, but they don't get brought to trial.
Right. Brock Turner is in the news recently.
Exactly.
And the judge let him off because he was a good college kid who was on the swim team and came from a good family. I think he literally said something like that during sentencing. It's like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Right. So you're saying that if he was black and he didn't go to college and he came from what you consider to be a bad family, like then you put him in jail? Like how does that make any
absolutely,
how does that make any sense? So they never prosecuted him?
They did. So then I went up the ladder. I actually called the DA. I was just at this point, like when I see, that's the other thing, is like when I see Unbelievable. When I saw the show Unbelievable, I was like, there's so many women I know that would have given up at this point, and it's not anything wrong with them. It's just, it's exhausting.
It's so much safer and easier to give up.
Yes. Yeah. But something in me just flipped. I was just like, rage. I was like, no, this can't be how this is. And I just would not stop. I was like, I need to talk to this person. I need to talk to that person. And when the hospital told me that they threw my urine away because it quote unquote goes bad, I called Quantico and talked to some forensic specialist in Virginia. And he was like, that's bullshit.
So for those who don't know, it's FBI headquarters.
Yeah, nice. It was the FBI. I talked to, I could not believe the dude totally answered the phone. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm so excited. But I mean, I pushed and then
Holden Ford.
I finally got this female attorney agree to take my case and prosecute. And she was like, this is not going to be a therapeutic experience. This is going to be very painful. Long story short, like deposition, 1.5 years drag out. Finally, court date is set. Worrying because he's, not in prison and knows that I'm accusing him of this. So I felt really scared a lot, like if I was safe.
Totally. I mean, I would be paranoid.
I thought he was going to kill me the morning of.
Yeah, and he's an attorney. What if he plants evidence? How he knows his way around this sort of world.
All of it.
He could take my house and my car and ruin my life. Like he's got power and friends and I'd be really
scared. And by the
scared.
time we got to where the trial date was set, I'd already lost my job and my house because I couldn't afford the house I was living in anymore.
Wow.
And
you were just like Unbelievable.
Seriously. Like it's hard to watch that. The only thing that's different is she caved and had to because she didn't have anybody. Right. And I know I had some feisty friends. I had some other friends that did what her friends did too. I had one friend that was like, I don't believe you. I had another friend tell me that they didn't want to hear me talking about it anymore.
So tell me about that.
I had another friend tell me that they thought I was going to hurt her. She thought I was going to hurt her small boy children because I was so quote unquote mad at men. And I was like, I'm not mad at men. I'm just mad that I was raped. And she made me the dangerous person. And I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
I lost so many friends over this because I remember being with that group of friends early on, and I was trying to kind of plaster a smile on and be normal again because I really wanted to be. And we were at like a Christmas cookie baking thing, and something happened. I just started crying again. And I remember looking at my friends. It's sad, but it's also kind of funny because I was like bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I'm still fun, right? And they were like, yeah, honey, you're fun.
So,
but I wasn't.
One of your friends didn't believe you?
Several.
Like, what was that process?
You know, just like, you're crazy. I don't believe you.
Why? Why would they?
I don't know. And honestly, I will say that's one of the things that I understand more deeply now about people not believing. And this is why I love that they titled this Unbelievable, is when I was young, I had a family member that said that she was raped. And I remember thinking, nah, she's lying. That didn't happen.
Yeah. Why do we do that?
I completely did that. Mm-hmm. And I hate myself. I didn't tell her that, but I held that thought. So I knew people around me held it, and then there were ones that would just say it.
Why do people do that?
I think that people don't want to believe the world is like that they are going to be hurt too. I think that they don't know how to respond, and it's like a denial just shut down. Like it's the way we don't understand. Like when you see real denial in action, it's just like, what is that?
Absolutely. So like one example is with disease. Like when you're around your friends or people, your family and stuff, you generally want everyone to be doing okay.
Yeah.
We're selfish, narcissistic, so you kind of want to be doing at least as well or maybe better than everyone around you. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to someone and they start in with a sob story about whatever, a lot of us go internally like, oh, this is not, I'm uncomfortable. Why can't you just say things are okay and move on with?
Bingo.
And then it's like, well, I've been diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to start chemo. And of course, externally you might say, oh, that's really terrible. But internally you're like, stop talking.
Yes.
I don't want to deal with this, right? I think this is sort of like this, where it's like, wait, I can't deal with this. But their external reaction is, I bet you that's not even real.
Yeah.
You know, it's so bizarre. Not to mention coupled with sexism and internalized oppression, all these things.
And a lot of women have actually been victimized and shoved it down. And when I tell them mine, they have to remember theirs, and they're just like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and men.
Men, yes.
A lot of people have been violated and have learned it's better to shove it down.
Yeah.
And then, exactly. There are people who have victimized other people in various different ways. And to engage in a conversation like that triggers their shame around, or either they actually did victimize people or they worried they victimized people.
Yep.
And it's just so much easier just to not talk about it.
Yes.
Okay. So that's why you think your friends did that?
I think so. But I mean, in the moment, it was like I was such a wreck about everything. I was just, all the raw emotions were on the outside all the time, and I was just disaster, and I was just really hurt by what I ended up turning to. Is I wrote a blog under a fake name, and ended up making like community with people who understood.
Was that kind of the rebuilding?
Yeah, that was throughout the whole process too. And
other victims writing in.
Other victims, other people who understood, there's so much solidarity in that. It can also be hard when you put victims together too soon, because there's this, you've been through a similar thing, but it's very different and a weird, you have a lot of a need to be paid attention to, nurtured, loved, protected, cared about. And if you're in competition for that attention in a room full of other people who are like that, it doesn't go well.
Right. So I want to talk about the one shining moment for Marie's life, or the first one is her therapist that she has, that she's court ordered to go to. So Berto is giving me the hand signal that he has to leave.
I'm very sorry. I have my brother's come in from town from San Francisco, and I need to go visit with him.
Okay. And so you're going to skip out, and so let's take a break, and when we get back, Berto will be gone. Do you have any final words, Berto?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for sharing. It's it's just incredibly brave. And I know you've been through the story, but I'm always impressed by people that can actually try to do some good with the bad things that happen to them. And I've known you for a while. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, but I think you're just a beautiful person and a wonderful human being. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Humberto.
Yeah.
Right back at you.
Yeah. All right. See you guys later.
Yeah.
All right, we're back from the break. I've been keeping this list because people have been asking me this question so often of like, what are some good depictions of therapy in TV and the movies? And surprisingly, there's very few.
Yes.
Out of the 200 or so on the list that I have, there's only now 3 depictions, including Unbelievable, that I believe are accurate and also good depictions of therapy. There's Ordinary People. There's Hope Springs, which strangely has Steve Carell as a couples therapist. And then there's this therapist in Unbelievable.
Yeah, she's great.
She does a lot of great things. Having said that, there are some things that I actually didn't like what she did. The first thing she did was when there was a question, is just like, well, what are you going to do? The therapist says, well, I can help you reframe it, she said, which I cringed at because it's like, that's not what she needs to hear right now. You know, as a therapist, you need to ask the question, there's a chance that she wasn't lying, 1. 2, even if, the point is that when you point out to a client who's been through a lot, she knew that, even if she did believe that it was a lie, the rape, she knew she'd been through a lot in her life. You don't tell a person, I'm going to help you reframe it. And basically look on the bright side,
right?
Which is not a good message to give. So I cringed at that moment. There was another cringe moment in the therapy. I can't remember when it was.
I have one.
What was it?
It was when she said, what can we do for if this injustice happens again? And it's like, fuck you, it's happening right now.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the other moment that was cringe-worthy to me because I was thinking, that's a known thing that people will sort of gravitate towards eventually through difficulty is post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Is one word for it. But you never prompt clients or anyone to do that. They will come to that naturally. You don't force people. Again, it discounts the whole thing. Like, look on the bright side. You learned a lesson. What are you going to take away from this? There are times when I ask questions like that, but it's after I know they're fully in that zone. They're in that space. You don't spring that on somebody. Having said that, she did a lot of really great things. Like she didn't get frustrated when Marie didn't want to talk.
Yep.
It's a very common thing for a court-ordered, abused system kid to be like, I've been in so much therapy. I'm sort of done. Everyone has failed me. I've had 15 other therapists fail me before you. I have to be here. Can't I just sit here silently? And she was totally cool. She's like, yep, you can just sit here and we'll just sit here. And then when there was an end, I don't know how many sessions in, then that began the conversation and that began the trust. And she opened up and then she believed her. She was like, I 100% believe you.
Yes.
That you don't need to convince me. You went through a rape, and she didn't assume, well, she's just she's lying to me. It was easy for her to believe that story. And so there are a lot of good things about that. And I was actually listening to a podcast, I think the NPR, like pop culture podcast, or I can't remember which one. And they were talking about this show, and they were talking about this therapist, and they were talking about how this therapist was the platonic ideal of a therapist, which implies that this therapist is somehow like strangely good.
Oh.
Like, yeah, I mean, this therapist was like the perfect therapist,
and
you know what I mean?
No.
And I'm like, no, not only did she have some cringe moments that I was like, if you had better training or you had better consultation, you would not have said that. But also, she is doing what most therapists know what to do. And the reason why this reviewer thinks that this therapist is like on the high end of the competency curve, it's because of all the other terrible depictions. I mean, it really saddens me to think of the general population believing that therapists are the way that they're depicted in the media.
It's so bad. Yeah, she didn't try to have sex with her.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big one.
Yeah, it's like a big shock.
Right.
It's usually where it goes. Anyway, so you are, man, I mean, I've known bits and pieces of the story. And incidentally, I want to point out that this is a story, in addition to other survivorships that you've been through and advocacy that you've done, this grew, and I want to hear more about the advocacy that eventually leads to you standing, I believe, in front of a crowd of people in Seattle at a podium telling your story and really moving people and helping a lot of other, coming forward and being that shining beacon of a safe place and an advocate, a true advocate for all the injustices that you've been through up until that point. And as a student, you were a star student. You were always really engaged and, were talented as a novice therapist. And I nominated you for Student of the Year for our, local professional association. You won it. And a big part of my nomination for you was this extra work that you're doing. I come across a lot of really good students that work hard, good therapists, but it's another thing to like put yourself on the line, stand up in front of the crowd, take on the hatred, open yourself up to the internet, open yourself up to the criticism all over again, because you've gotten to a point where you're strong enough to step forward, you're knowledgeable enough, you have the support system, and you're actually going to try to make the world a better place. This is what is noble about, your decision, and sets you apart from other star students. And so that's why I was happy to nominate you for that
thank you.
Little token. So tell us, what was your process with that?
With that,
the advocacy process.
The advocacy process. Well, first I'll also say, I just want to thank you for that. And I remember talking with you, I don't know if you remember me saying this, but I remember maybe I didn't really say it very clearly, but I kind of snuck in, like, there's a little part of me that worries that I'm getting nominated for this because I've, like, a pity nomination because I've had a tough time in life. And I do that a lot with anything that's kind of given to me around this stuff. And I've learned to fully take it in. And that's really one of the first times that I actually did. I would also say that working with you and some other experiences I've had with you where you've had my back has really helped change my schema in the world, Yeah, I remember you saying that. You'd be like, after we would talk or something, you'd email me or something, you'd be like, you're really rewiring my brain around men. You are. And authority. Yes, so much so. I mean, I know, and just a quick side note, like there was something a while back that I was scared of, and I wasn't asking for help, and you said, I was like, no, I don't need any help, and you were like, what time is your appointment or whatever, and you were
well, do you want to tell that story, because it might be helpful
is it weird
people.
So
I mean, it's kind of interesting because therapists are out there, probably in
so the story was that there were, at least from what I know, 2 therapists attacked in Seattle, sexually assaulted in their offices by a man that was obviously not doing okay. I don't have a lot of information about him other than what was supposedly his picture. And
so he was posting a lot on Twitter or something about how he was actually going to harm therapists. He's like, I'm going to make appointments with therapists and I'm going to get them or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he did. He would make appointments with therapists with the intent of making them, of assaulting them. And he would make appointments with women and he would grab them and kind of shove them around.
I think he raped one, or both, possibly. But
and these were the ones who actually came forward and reported it. And there was an investigation, and the police weren't acting very quickly about it.
Typical.
And
Sorry,
a
police.
lot of other therapists became aware, like on Facebook or something, of like, so watch out for this guy. And then other people, oh my God, he called me and he creeped me out. Oh my God, he actually assaulted me.
Right.
So there's this guy that's at large. It kind of got into the news a little bit,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
What was the resolution as to
Probably nothing, unfortunately. I mean, I never heard. I had to kind of disconnect from panicking about it for my own benefit. But
And then
like
did he
most
contact?
things, he did contact when I was at Modern Therapy.
Okay. So he contacted you to try to make an appointment with you,
Right.
and you knew better to not.
Well, it went through Kate.
Okay.
She sent an email out. She said,
Watch out for this
man
guy.
reached out
So he might
to make an appointment with one of our therapists. It could have been me, but she just kind of said, "There's this."
So because she just was aware of the internet,
Right.
knew to screen this guy out.
Yeah.
And so you were pretty rattled by that.
Very. I
Naturally.
remember talking with you and being like, I'm scared because I know that nobody cares and no one's going to do anything about this. And I'm worried, when is it going to happen?
Right. And then you had made an appointment with a new client, a new
Yes.
male client who you didn't have any reason to suspect,
Yeah.
but you obviously would be scared.
I was
and
scared.
I think you had like tiny little hints of like, well, maybe
Something didn't quite add up.
Yeah, it wasn't overt, but it was, just natural. And you were like, I think I might want to cancel this appointment with this new client tomorrow,
Right.
because I don't know if I can deal with this, today. So, long story short, I was just like, well, how about I just be in your lobby, and then I'll just be right on the other side of the door. And if anything happens, just scream and I'll be there.
Right.
I told you, I don't know how good of a fighter I am, but I'll be another human being.
There.
You know what I mean?
I'm like, I got my baseball bat.
Yeah, that was right. You had it's a very fancy, embroidered kind of, but it could wallop
Carved
someone.
and painted from Mexico.
Yeah. It's actually the
beautiful
perfect
bat.
size and heft, because a full baseball bat is kind of long to hit someone. Yours is yours is like actually like a police baton.
Yeah, it's kind of small. Yeah.
You could really whack someone with it. But anyway, so it looks like it looks like this nice little decoration.
It totally does.
But it seconds as Christy's get back tool if you get too
Right,
close.
Exactly.
And so I had the time, and I thought to myself, well, if all it takes is for me just to be there, and that will set her mind at ease, then no brainer.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and
You did.
everything went fine.
But the funny thing is this is what I remember the most, is that I said, no. I think you even messaged me the night before, and you were like, what time's that client? I said 9 a.m. or whatever. And I said, you know what? I think I'm fine. I've got the bat. I have a plan. I think I'm going to be okay. And you were like, see you 8:30, something like that. And I was like, okay, I guess you're coming.
Yeah, I mean.
And it was hard for me to accept that kind of support.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible correctional experience for me. For you to be there and care, it kind of mirrors what happened in Unbelievable. Like, this is where the schemas shift, right? Like, she didn't feel like anyone would believe her or care or fight for her, but those detectives did. And we don't have a lot of those out there. And so...
And it's not that people aren't willing to fight. It's that they don't know the landscape. So when you told me,
Yeah.
nah, I got it, I'm fine. I know you very well.
Yeah.
And had known, even particularly at that moment, because we talked about it during that day.
Yes.
And I knew,
Lots of crying.
She's just saying that. You know what I mean? She. It's not like in the last hour somehow her traumas went away. So I know her. She's trying to be nice.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a burden.
She's trying to be a nice person, and she's trying to give the impression that everything's fine, and she doesn't want to put me out. I can't convince her of that in this moment, so I'm just going to be there. And if she really doesn't like it, she'll let me know.
I would have said something, but like you were like, I'll be there, and
Yeah.
and I think I needed that little And I was like, okay. Like, I think if I said no, and like kept saying, you'd probably be like, all right,
Oh, okay.
fine. But
then
like,
you'd be like, no, really, I actually don't want you there because you're going to
Right.
freak me out,
Right.
or whatever.
But it made
okay.
me so comfortable that you were there, and we got to like chat for a little bit before the client came, and that really helped soothe my nerves. And then you said, I'll even sit outside the door for a little while. I think you were going to sit outside the door for like a half an hour or something, or maybe most of the session. And honestly, I really didn't have many people do anything like that for me in my life. So I really appreciate that.
Again, people want to.
Yeah.
But they don't know to.
No, they don't know to.
And
that's what she's saying is like in Unbelievable. She's kind of saying like people want to believe that
Right.
they're good. People want to help, but sometimes they just don't know how,
Right.
or they can't.
Right.
But sometimes they can. And being open to allowing someone to help you is part of the healing process too.
And the only reason why I knew, if you would have rewound the clock 20 years or 10 years, I wouldn't have known. What I have learned is through my treatment of people who have been through horrible events, I have learned the premises that informed my actions in that moment, to disregard your attempts to deburden me. I knew, now I'm pretty sure, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been taught by actual human beings, and I guess maybe even my own sort of self-awareness. And that's because we have failed as a society to pay attention to this. It's not rocket science. It's something that can be in our culture and understood and talked about and portrayed in movies and TV, so that everyone can be like, oh, so that's a thing? Like,
Yeah.
When you pressure people and scare them, they'll to get out of it, they'll just say they lied.
Right.
I didn't know that was a thing. Why would you admit you lied about something? It seems like if unless you lied, why would you admit you lied? Oh, you see Unbelievable, you get, oh, I get it.
Right.
She's terrified.
That's why this is so important.
Right. Making a murderer with the Dassey kid.
Right.
In his what is believed to be a false confession. You wouldn't intuit that.
Right.
You need to be educated on that.
I think that's kind of the problem too. Like even back to the justice system pieces. Like I remember being really scared to go to trial because I thought, what if they, because I knew it was a possibility that he would get off, and I thought, what if that happens? Is everyone gonna think I'm lying? Or is that gonna fuel that? I knew for some reason I could just always hold on to my own truth. Like I knew what happened, and I knew I needed to do everything I could. So I never, even if people didn't believe me, as time went on, I understood why they didn't and what victim blaming is and how we don't know how to deal with this. And I would just hold on to my own truth, and that was a comfort to me. But when it came down to, I was hoping to have the trial with the jury, and there were all kinds of things too. Like I call it victim performativity, where they want you to perform the right way like a victim. This came up for Marie in Unbelievable, where she didn't perform the way someone might expect they would, or victims should, or maybe what we see on TV.
Right.
And that's a problem. Like I remember being coached by my attorney saying, now when you get on the stand, cry a little, but don't cry too much. Because if you don't cry at all, they're going to think you don't have any feelings about it. And if you cry too much, they're going to think you're crazy.
Right.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And I was just really nervous about the whole thing. But I really wanted my day in court. I wanted to say what happened. I wanted to see it through. But because rape's a crime against the state, my attorney decided to take a plea bargain, which I did not want, and I didn't get a choice in that. And she, in fact, told me that she wouldn't take it until she talked to me. But she did anyway. And so I got an email. Like while I was at school, I'm sitting in the library and I got an email saying that they're accepting a plea to a lesser charge of felonious restraint, which is basically kind of like kidnapping, but like the way he was holding me on the couch, like I could have suffocated. So that was like the reasoning behind it. Like I was held against my will.
So this avoids him being
a sex offender,
designated as a sex offender
or a rapist. And so he pled guilty.
Even though it's
like
absolutely a sexual offense.
And it's not even what happened. Like, I mean, I was like, I thought the law was a place to find the truth, but it's not. It's
and
a place to make up what's convenient for everyone.
Why does it need to be plea bargained?
I never understood that.
You have a victim.
I think they knew he was going to be guilty.
An account of what happened. Well, I think what the prosecutor thought was the jury wouldn't believe you.
That, or like, I actually think she just wanted to be done. And I think the other people, like he pled guilty to a felony. I think Class C felony, which he was disbarred. But that was really all that happened. Like, he never spent a day in jail.
What?
Not a single one. He got sexual offender counseling for a year.
Even though he didn't technically...
Right. Even though legally that's not what happened, supposedly. And he was never listed as a sex offender.
Right.
So no jail time, no sex offender status.
Have you ever Googled him or anything?
Yeah, he's pretty low profile out there. And, he was in the room. This was the other thing that made me really mad was... So she told me there was a plea. I'd already had my flights set to come home for the trial date. This was like early March in 2008. And they were like, well, you can read an impact statement. And that's what you saw on Unbelievable, a little bit of that. They said I could read this impact statement, and then the judge would take into consideration the impact it had on my life when he goes to sentence or to dole out whatever justice was supposed to be there. The problem was I went there and I gave my impact statement standing in front of my rapist in a courtroom with a judge and the attorneys. And I said this whole thing, and when I got to the end, I mean, I think it was moving, and the judge actually sat up and he almost started to clap. He like brought his hands together and he was like, one clap, and then he stopped himself because he's like, that's not okay. You could kind of see it cross his mind.
Okay.
But the thing that made me so mad was I found out shortly after that, actually right out, he was like, the judge was like, now hearing this, I wish I wouldn't have accepted the deal. So they made me get up, told me that this impact statement was going to have some impact on how he was sentenced, but they'd already finalized everything. So this was all a show, just like the rape kit, just like everything else. It was all a show. Nothing really got done with it. And it's infuriating. And I think that's where the activism came out, was I was like, I can't let more people go through this. And I can't change the fact that it happens, but I can change how we respond to it. I started teaming up with women that I met all over the country that were doing different pieces of activism. One is a woman, Angela Rose, who has an organization called PAVE, and she educates police departments and attorneys and things like that. That's part of the work she does, but she helps to educate the response.
Police advocacy, victims education?
Yeah. Actually, the PAVE is promoting awareness and victim empowerment.
Oh, okay.
She was assaulted and kidnapped when she was a teenager, and he had killed all his other victims, but she got out alive somehow. She's a really cool woman, powerhouse. And these are the women that I just gravitated to. I just gravitated to my friend Kara in Kansas City. Kara probably will be listening to this, and I'm just going to say, girl, I love you so much. And she got me connected with people in Kansas City that helped me find Beth Lowe, who was a Missouri state rep that tried to help me get legislation passed.
Oh.
and, just really started. And then I went back to school, and I felt this community of the women around me in the women's studies department. And so many of the women and young girls in that area, they'd been through stuff too, and I was super vocal. And
so UW?
Yeah, UW. And they would come to me, like teachers would say, like, if a young girl went to the professor to say, like, I've had a sexual assault or something's happened, they would send them to talk to me. And then
you thought, I'm going to be a therapist.
Well, my favorite professor, Rebecca Anarud, she was with me through the whole process. And I started school after the rape and before the trial ended. And she said, you know what? Because I was like, maybe I should be a teacher. Maybe I should get a PhD in feminist theory. And she was like, I feel like you'd be a really good therapist. And so I started down that road because of her. And because, I realized after trying to change policy and getting involved in like legal stuff, that changing a system and changing the policy was too painful for me, because it was a reminder of everything that happened. What I really wanted to do was have the power to impact the people's lives who needed to heal. I got to help people figure out how to live in this world and still find joy, And that's really why I became a therapist.
Wow.
And now, like, I work with a lot of different types of issues in therapy, which I absolutely love, all the variety of work I do. But boy, when I get a survivor, that's why I'm there, Do
you remember your first survivor?
Yes.
What was that like? That was an internship?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can't give the details, but
yeah. It's hard not to cry.
in session.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like for you to work with that person emotionally?
Oh, so wonderful, because I thought, I know what you need, or at least I have a better guess at it than other people do.
Did you guess right?
Yes. And
How'd
I was
you
like,
know?
and I'm going to listen mostly.
How'd you know that you had it right?
I think because she really opened up, She was the kind of client that would just dissociate and just sit there and stare at the wall, really not even there,
But she opened up to you.
Mm-hmm. And I also saw her improve because she was going through legal stuff too. And
did you ever tell her to look on the bright side and reframe?
No.
Find the positive side of the story?
No. I think too, one thing I know as a therapist, I mean, there's so many different ways people need healing, but one of the things that I think my therapists did for me, the psychologist was okay, but it was really the therapist after I came back from Spain, because I ended up in the middle of school, and after the trial, I was like, I don't want to live in this world. I want to go live on another planet. I used to pull up my internet and do island shopping, because I had this dream of just going to live on an island by myself where it was safe. And anyways, I ran away to Spain, and then when I came back, I got the therapist that I'd been seeing for a long time, and she let me be angry a lot of anger to kind of get that out. Be sad. Go through your own process. I mean, that's what I think you were alluding to, is like people are going to come to their post-traumatic growth on their own if they're going to go that direction, but it was,
I mean, you can throw it out there.
Things.
You can be like, there's this thing called post-traumatic growth, or you can say, sometimes people find like a purpose. Like, I know someone who was sexually assaulted. She went through a whole bunch of horrible things. The justice system let her down. Therapists let her down. Her friends let her down. Her family let her down. But over many, many years and lots of struggle and pain, she got in touch with her anger and fought back and advocated and tried to get laws changed, and then became a therapist because she wanted to actually help other victims like this. And this was a meaning that she derived from the trauma and terribleness that she went through.
Yeah.
But that's just one story. I don't know if that's going to happen to you.
Right.
But I just want to throw that out there as like, I don't know, maybe that'll happen. I'm not saying you're supposed to like somehow turn this around right now, but I'm just throwing it out there as like, maybe that's in your distant future. I don't know.
Right.
You can throw stuff like that out there for people, give people some hope or something.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say things like, you might be hearing stories like you're not going to like sex, or you're never going to find love, or the things that people tell you about how hard it's going to be. And I was like, could be true maybe, but don't take that as a prescription for your future of how things are going to be, because that's what I was told. And I started feeling like, wow, no one's going to want me. I'm all damaged, and I'm not going to like sex, and I'm not going to know how to love. And I mean, to be honest, I have struggled with figuring out how to connect with people and love, but
you're open.
But I'm open, and I think I'm in the most healthy spot I've ever been in my life. And there's a difference between healthy sex and sexual assault.
Yeah,
there's a huge difference. So like, we don't have to write that off. Like, sometimes I think victims think, if I am happy or if I have sex and enjoy it, then what happened to me wasn't that bad. Or people are going to think that. And so we kind of parade our victimhood and pain longer sometimes. At least I felt like I had to. I think like maybe it was because I was under the eye of the justice system of like, how was I going to act on what is that when you sit in the chair in front of the trial? On the stand.
Do you tell your clients that you went through that?
Some. Yeah. Yeah.
How do they respond?
Really well. I try to be very careful. I'm in a great space, so I try to be very careful about the level of disclosure and making sure that it's going to benefit them.
I can't imagine how helpful it would be for a client like Marie to hear from their therapist that they've been through something similar. They felt also discounted.
Totally.
Thrown away by so many different people.
Yeah.
Confused, despair, suicidal.
Yep.
Looking to buy islands to literally island oneself off from the rest of the world.
Yeah, it was.
Live off mangoes for the rest of your life.
It's funny you say that, because there's a poem that I read sometimes to clients, and I always go back to it for myself, and maybe that's where I got the island idea, but the name of the poem is Island of the Raped Women. But nothing about the poem talks about rape. It's like, maybe we'll collect some oranges and make jam, and maybe we'll watch the crabs run across the sand, and maybe we'll make some sweet cream and bread, and maybe we'll talk to each other and take naps in the sun. It's all about just being really peaceful, enjoying like the beauty of the island, enjoying the food, enjoying each other's company, sleeping without being afraid. Like, it's just this beautiful poem. And I love that it's called Island of the Raped Women, because I mean, sometimes you just want to get away from that definition of who you are and how that means you're supposed to suffer.
Yeah.
You just want to go to an island and eat orange marmalade and take a nap.
I think it's a common fantasy that people have. I mean, during stressful moments of my life, have had not that fantasy, but a fantasy of like specifically becoming a monk and living in the mountains in a cave and meditating all day. There's something about that fantasy of an indication of stress and of societal oppression. Mm-hmm. Did this show provide cathartic release for you?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, I watched it with a sharp eye, though, too, because I was like,
this better not fuck it up.
Yeah. I was like, please don't mess this up, The
worry I had at the very end was they were going to show Marie finding a man.
Ah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that was going to be like the
or a woman or anybody other than herself.
Someone to fall in love with.
Right.
And that was going to be an indication of her healing. And I was like, please don't make her, Because I'm sure she did at some point, and apparently she did. She got married and had kids.
Right.
But I was like, don't have that be the riding off into the sunset with the man.
Right.
That didn't happen. But anyway, a lot of people who haven't been through experiences like yours say that this show has a very cathartic release at the end.
Yes.
Satisfaction of much frustration up until that point.
Yeah.
Was that true for you?
Yeah, it was funny because it came on the heels of the schema therapy, and I don't want to say too much in case listeners haven't seen the end, but I relate to her, in a lot of ways, and in that freedom, cathartic ending. There were things about it that I was like, that would not, like, I was like, they didn't really talk to someone who's been raped enough to, like, my biggest criticisms were there was one scene where the detective shows up at her work to apologize, and I was like, no rape victim is going to stand outside at night alone with a man who'd already hurt her. That, and I would have run. I would have run away.
Right.
Like there was that, and then there was...
Or even work alone at night.
Yeah, work alone at night. No, I mean, maybe she didn't have much choice, definitely at that age and trying to get by, but I was like, there was a lot of things like that where I was like, no, and then I also, there was one scene that was really important where somebody at her work cornered her, and that guy knew that he could do something to her and no one would believe her.
Right.
And then there was the other scene that really broke my heart where she wanted to hang out with the foster dad, and he was like, I can't hang out with you alone because I'm afraid you're going to accuse me. That was pretty real, though.
Yeah.
I think that happens. But the other things that I was like, that I thought there was one other thing I thought was really good, and then there was one that I thought was kind of bad, and that was... As much as it was a delight to see two female cops actually dig and care, I was like, don't get people's hopes up that that's how things go. Too much. Like, nice idea, but true. And then in the end, like the sentencing was not kind of what you would expect sometimes, but I hope should I not tell too much more?
I'm just general.
Yeah, general. And then the other thing,
but possible. I mean, the sentencing could have happened that way.
Yeah. Oh, I believe in that case it could have.
But you don't want people to get their hopes up because around the same time, you went through a situation that was probably more typical.
Yeah.
Where that's not the way it happened.
And one of the things that was interesting about this too was they chose and it was a true story, so they went with that. But we're talking about multiple women and multiple rapes. I remember the judge when he got done listening to my impact statement, he addressed my rapist and he said, if you ever do this to another woman, I'm putting you away for many, many years. And I remember thinking, but then I was like, wait a second, why am I not enough?
Right.
Why is just one woman not enough? We've got to like throw it. Does it have to be like a deal on like lots of women getting raped? And
you get one chance. You can rape one person.
Right.
Okay, freebie.
Yeah.
Next one,
I actually created a piece of artwork that was a how like at coffee shops they give you the punch card, and it was like your first rape's free.
Wow.
And then it was the idea is like, welcome to the state of Missouri, the first rape is free.
Wow.
Get 5 rapes on this card and we might send you to jail. That's how I felt like. Yeah.
I mean, the thing again, I'm not an expert on the justice system, but my take on it is that for me, in terms of what I would like people to be taken off the streets, are violent criminals.
Yes.
Someone who smells and sells crack cocaine or whatever. I don't care.
No.
Citation, whatever.
Right.
But they're not what I'm worried about. No. I don't worry about someone selling marijuana out of their house in, Idaho. What I am worried about is someone who likes or thinks it's okay to assault people's bodies.
Yeah.
Those sorts of people, I think, need to be dealt with very soundly.
Yeah.
Either, now I don't know if it's jail time or treatment or monitoring or probation. I don't care, but of the higher end consequences, murderers, people who get angry and shoot a gun out of anger, people who brandish a knife, people who rape people, people who threaten to kill people, those are the people I don't want around me. I don't care, like I said, even if someone, insider trading, embezzling,
right, exactly.
Those are bad.
Bad.
They need consequences. But why are people who, sell marijuana 5 times and they're in jail for literally the rest of their life in some states? And then you have people who repeatedly assault people in various different ways and they're on the streets.
Yeah.
It just boggles the mind.
Right. It's baffling, yes, to see like rapists will get out so early. Like that's the other thing is I think the max sentence lately is like really around 6 years, often get out around 3. Some people don't even go. They just have probation. Sometimes they're in and out in 6 months.
And the thing is like, okay, obviously someone's making that choice or a group of people are making that choice. I don't think any American, Republican or Democrat, is behind that way of thinking.
No, I don't know what's going on.
Like, what's wrong with them?
Yes.
You'd think they would want to stand up and be like, I am the hero who took this rapist off the street.
Right.
What's this compulsion to go easy on them?
Yeah. And it makes me, I used to get so mad because I would turn on the news and I would hear a story about a young girl that got kidnapped, raped, and murdered. And everybody would be like aghast, like, oh, how could this happen? I'm like, I can tell you how it happens. That dude's done this before and gotten off. And a lot of times I do have a previous record. And it's like...
Because there's an escalation in one's behavior.
Yes. I would also say, though, like the justice system, or like, I've grappled a lot with what the hell is justice, number one. And also, is putting them in prison really helping?
Right.
There's all that. I even felt sad for my rapist. I was like, man, I'm really sad that he's going to maybe go to jail. Like, it made me worry for his welfare. I was like sad that this whole situation, I could still have empathy for him. I don't know how.
If you could say something to him, what would it be?
Ooh, that's hard. Because I doubt he's listening, or could listen, ever come across this, but... Oh, that's a good question. I think I think his life is ruined the way he...
Disbarred.
Yeah, and shame and embarrassment in his family. And I don't know, I used to think I wanted him to, like I wrote out what I wanted for the judge, and I was like, I don't know what justice is. I don't know what, that's apparently not up for me to decide, but I would like for him to get help so he doesn't hurt any more people. And if he can't not hurt people, then we need to keep him away from society. But ultimately and it was weird, is like I wanted him to suffer as long term as I have, it's really affected my life. I'm really surfacing now into a much better space. It's 13 years later. Yeah. That's a big chunk. And I think...
Would you want him to know that?
Maybe, I would want him to know that, I'm not going to get another life, and some of I've talked about this before, but I think some of the damage for me was that it was hard for me to connect to people, trust men enough to go on dates. That kind of stuff was hard for a while. And then, I kind of missed the years where I could have had a baby, and that's just not going to be part of my life. And I don't blame that on him, but I always wonder, what would it be like if that hadn't happened? Would I have met someone and gotten married and had kids? And But I'm okay with where my life has gone, you know. I'm glad that I took this negative thing and tried to make it positive, and that I'm helping people. And that's the other thing. Like, I talk about this not because I'm so special or I want attention, or I don't know, like some people say that stuff. It's more that people always say, like, how can you talk about something so personal? And I'm like, if it's happening to this many people, it is not personal.
Yeah.
And I am a person who has a voice, and I'm not afraid to use it. And some people can't use theirs because of safety, because of a whole bunch of other reasons. And so since I can, and I'd like to see the culture change, and I'd like to see people understand, I'll tell my story.
And I think it's working. You have changed me. I haven't been through an experience like that. And although I would like to think intellectually I could have somewhat gotten here, I wouldn't have been able to get 90% of the way that I have without you telling your story. I sort of intellectually knew in the past of the trials and tribulations of the rape kit and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea until you told me. And so when I saw this show, none of it was shocking to me.
Right.
But other than to see it actually was vivid reminder of what you had already told me about.
That's why it's been so beautiful, this show, is it like pulls up our narratives and our stories to a visual light.
For the first time.
Yeah, it's like, here is,
can you think of any other show or movie that has anything like this, that's this vivid and this drawn out and this demonstrative of what happens to so many people like you?
The only one is, there's a movie with Jodie Foster years ago where she was raped. I forget the name of Accused. And that had that was kind of the early... Similar, but this is more nuanced. It's more
systemic.
I'd love to see some work on. We always focus so much on the victim, and I'm glad we do now that people are getting heard. It sucks to be silenced, but we're always looking at what the victim do, what the victim say, where's the perpetrator? Why are we not looking? And we did. I guess this show did look at that a little more, but like, what's happening to create this scenario where this happens, where people choose to do this?
Netflix tends to want to make season 2s of popular things, and after watching this, I was like, well, they're not going to make a season 2. That's ridiculous. But then now you're saying this, if they're listening, which I'm sure they're not, maybe that's season 2. Is like they jump to you, and you're standing on the podium, and you are at the legislature level, and you're becoming a therapist.
Standing in front of King County with signs.
Yeah, and
in front of the courthouse.
Your friends, that you talked about, they're actually going to the police precincts, and they're fighting the denial and the culture, and they're trying to change or say, look, we're not telling you that you're bad people. We're just saying you need to understand something that you wouldn't naturally understand, and when you understand it, you'll be able to do better police work, really.
Yes.
And catch the bad guys better. And so, because that's what you want to do, right? Yeah, we're police. We want to catch the bad guys. Okay, well, let us help you with knowledge so that you can better understand how to interview the victims, how to understand the signs of lying.
Yes.
It's this very common thing of like, and I loved how they depicted that, how Marie was very shut down.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, that's suspicious. No, newsflash, there's no universal way that people react to trauma. Amanda Knox, that whole story of just like, oh, she's kissing her boyfriend. She couldn't have just been through something like that. It's like, what psychology book does there say this is the universal response to trauma? There is no universul response to trauma.
And I think they pushed that point in the second episode with the second victim.
Right. Because
I honestly was like, they're setting this up to try to make the viewers who won't know to believe to doubt this one. Because she kept saying things like, well, I mean, he didn't leave anything there. And the way she was acting initially.
She seemed so nonchalant.
Yeah, she seemed a little out of it and nonchalant, but she was like, there was she kind of was excusing a lot of things,
Right.
you know, but
Like
that
maybe
was
she knew him and
something
Yeah.
like, I was like, the writers are trying to make the viewers doubt this one.
right.
Because with Marie, we knew it happened.
Right, because we saw the flashbacks, and,
Right.
you know, and so that was brilliant because again, there's no universal reaction to
Right.
this sort of thing, and people typically have a baseline sort of emotional state that they sort of return to after trauma, or they dissociate. The other thing I like that they talked about that we haven't talked about is that they showed that rape victims aren't pretty blondes.
Exactly.
That necessarily they can be, but
Yeah.
they can be someone.
Elderly women.
Yeah, they can be anybody. Some rapists have a profile, but many perpetrators, they don't care who it is. They just want to dominate.
Because it's not about sex; it's about
Right.
power.
Yeah, they want to. They get off on domination and on humiliation.
Yep.
And that's the compulsion. It has nothing to do with like one's regular sexual urges. You can't translate. You can't imagine like, okay, you can't take your sexuality and sort of push it to one side and go like, okay, that's what rape must be. It's this whole
Right.
other kind of deal.
Yes.
And so I liked that. What else?
Yeah, you had some notes there.
Yeah.
Me too. It's funny you have your notes and I've got mine. I'm like, oh, what's all this stuff? I
Let's
forgot
see.
to put my glasses are on my head.
I like that, the acting, directing, cinematography, writing. I like that.
Yeah, I was wanting to talk about how well that was done.
Yeah, it's very well acted, very well
I think
directed.
it really makes the storyline more important, and like if
Yeah.
it was done poorly, I think it would be harder for people to.
Yeah, like an after-school special kind
Right.
of thing. The other thing is that it was a feminist show in a very strong way, in a very important way, without it being overtly feminist, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Like a non-feminist could watch this show and feel, you know, good about the result and sort of like
Yeah.
in or on board with the message without knowing they are in a feminist world.
Right.
They are witnessing the patriarchy. They are cheering for the feminists, whether they call themselves feminists or
Right.
not.
Right.
They're cheering for the notion of recognizing the plight of the marginalized.
Yeah.
And they are angry at the system
Yeah.
that is old and in place, whether we call it patriarchy or just tradition or ignorance or something. This is a solid feminist creation.
Totally. And the strength it takes to be a woman and work within the system to try to change it.
Right. Yeah. And how wonderful it felt, how like I don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of typical.
But
And
it wasn't like I think it took away the man-hating element. I
Right.
actually thought about this because they were both married to men.
yeah.
And I think that was, if it's not true in real life, it was strategic.
No, it's true. There's some details that were also true, like the detail where the first detective woman, her husband randomly said, actually, in my precinct, we have a similar case. And that's what tipped her to be like, wait, do we have a serial case going? And that's what caused her to start to actually
so
broaden.
It
It was that
little
random
moment.
detail that was in real life that her husband
Yeah.
actually mentioned, like, because the perpetrator knew that, again, the police departments, he always did different precincts, and they talked about that in the show.
Yeah.
He knew that the precincts don't communicate with each other,
Yeah.
which I find to just be
I got worried for a hot minute that it was him because they were after a police guy who knew the
Right.
way around and
Well,
knew
the
the
first
police
person I was
districts
worried
didn't talk
about-
to each other, and I was
the
like,
first
oh my
person
God, don't let it be this cool husband. I like him.
Yeah. Well, the first person I was worried about was the youth worker who worked in the,
Yes.
when he showed up, I was just
Yes.
like, oh God, is that him?
We really like you, Marie.
Yeah, exactly.
it was,
Yeah, I liked, the last thing I'll say that I liked, which is sort of off topic, is that this is one of the very first and only sympathetic portrayals of a religious person I have seen in a Hollywood production.
Yes.
And I find that to be strange that in a country that is majority Christian, or at least half or something, that there are so few positive depictions of Christians. Now, there are reasons to bring up the negative
people have been hurt by
teaching of Christianity, of various different sects, Catholicism, otherwise, of notions of anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-woman, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely.
Sure.
Let's talk about that. But there's plenty of fine
good stuff.
People who go to evangelical churches.
Of wonderful people in my family.
Yeah, and it was just so weird to see. Like, oh, halfway through this show, we got a woman who is our hero, who we love.
Yeah.
And
I love her.
And she's just going to church.
I would marry her.
You know what another?
She's amazing.
Do you know what another movie she's in that I saw her in recently that I highly recommend?
No.
Charlie Says.
Oh,
so
Charlie Says.
It came out last year. It's about Charles Manson.
Oh, yeah.
And she is a social worker who goes to the prison and talks to some of the women who are, who have been convicted of murder.
Oh, yeah.
And she's trying to deprogram them.
Oh.
And she's a very similar character.
I love her demeanor, whatever it is.
So I'd watch Charlie Says because
Charlie Says, okay.
Her character is really interesting, and it's actually, I think the whole movie is based on her book that she wrote or something.
Yeah.
So she might be a rising star. That actress.
She's amazing. Yeah. I also liked, just since we're on the liked portions, I liked the examples of the Parker, the male detective, the lead detective from the first. He was the one who got everything wrong. It was nice to see an example of someone owning their stuff and apologizing it in a way that was really good. You know, it wasn't easy. Like when he was talking to Rasmussen, the detective, like, if you're a professional, and you're that guy, I could easily see the ego wanting to surface and say, hey, I didn't see anything there. It's not my fault. And like, there's somebody other person, like pass it off or excuse yourself or justify it. But he said, when I see bad guys on the force, sometimes I think, what are they doing on there? Let's just get rid of them.
I think I'm one of those guys.
Yeah. And then he's like, maybe we should get rid of me.
Yeah.
And the look on his face, I was just like, it was helpful.
Yeah.
To see someone, my detective, the one detective I had, he's the reason, he's the only one in that whole path that was so awesome, and I just appreciate it when I see someone being able to shoot straight like that. Yeah,
and as a writer, it would have been so much easier to write him off as an evil person.
Bad guy, but they didn't. They humanized him, which was so important because I think he can be a symbol for other police officers who've made mistakes to be like, it's okay. You know what? We are going to make mistakes sometimes. We know that as therapists, we're going to make mistakes sometimes. As people, we make mistakes. Like,
and
do something about it.
Here's what you do.
Yeah.
You start with humility.
Yeah.
Of like, I have no idea. And that was his whole thing, was I have no idea how this happened.
Yeah, he was like, I got nothing.
I feel like I should have an explanation. I don't really have any.
Yeah.
And he's really sorry for it. And it's, instead of it being a story of good versus evil, it's a story about ignorance and lack of ignorance.
Yeah.
And it's a story about people asking for forgiveness instead of holding to their ego. And I thought that was a great, he is a hero of sorts, of someone by the end, became a hero by admitting he did something wrong, by being humble, by being sorry, by saying he was sorry.
Yeah.
By being confused. And yeah, I thought that was great.
I think that's kind of what I would want from my rapist. Maybe you asked that question. I don't think I ever answered it exactly. That kind of like, wow.
I don't know how
I did that or why.
And I'm confused.
And
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. And then it would be so nice, like my hope, because I don't even want to define myself as what kind of person I am, but I just have this desire for him to get better, be kind, find some peace, don't hurt anybody else. We all make mistakes. Maybe that was his first, maybe it wasn't, maybe he's done it a lot of times, but like, if this is the only life we get, I would hope that he would find a way out of that pain, who he is or what he did. I don't even know if it's who he is. I think it's what he did. I want people to have a chance to be better. And I don't know if forgiveness is necessary for that. I don't know if my forgiveness is necessary for that. I don't know that I forgive him, but I do see what happened in the big structure of the world. The way we look at systems, I understand that there was probably a lot more to this than the point where our paths crossed.
Right.
And I just hope he doesn't have to suffer. And I hope his suffering doesn't spill out onto other people again. I really believe, and I want to believe at least, that people are good, even when they are capable of bad things. And I don't think if we don't give them a chance to return to that or have the hope for it, then I think they'll double down and say, yeah, all right, I surrender.
Yeah.
I'm a criminal.
Right.
And some people might.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Christy.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot like, I didn't know what to expect. But it means a lot to me to have a voice. It means a lot to me to talk about this show.
It means a lot to everyone else. It means a lot to me. In the same way that people respond to Unbelievable as a document of importance, I'm positive people find your story and your path and your energy and because you're a therapist too. A lot of people will write in, like when Bob talks about things, they'll be like, it's great to hear Bob talk about it, but to hear it from a therapist is like so powerful because he's supposed to know he's a helper. And to hear him talk from a therapist's point of view about himself has given me the chance to have a lot of self-compassion.
Yeah.
You're a therapist. And so the clients out there who have been, abused in some way.
Yeah. I want them to know. That's one of the other reasons I speak, is I want people to know they're not alone. I think we're more in that place now than we were back when I was starting activism, like the Me Too movement and things has really surfaced stuff. Right. But
we're not done.
And that we're not done.
But time's up.
And I need to, time's up. And I need to we need to know you're not alone. I think that's why I became unhealthy involved in my activism, because I thought I was the only person. I thought I needed to be the hero. And then when I met other people who were doing the work, I was like, oh, we can share in this burden. I don't have to do it all by myself. But sometimes people feel they're alone out there. And if anyone is listening, I want you to know you're not. And it sucks to be a victim. And things can be different going forward, but maybe they suck right now. But
yeah,
you might be surprised what the future holds. Yeah. But
your
story matters.
Your story matters. And so if you want to contact Christy, go to our website and go to the Contact Us page, email me, and I'll forward it to Christy. Thanks for joining us, Christy. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.